Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast, episode 110, this week with Nelson from Poetry of Plants. And thanks a lot for joining us. We also have Roger.
How y'all doing? Good to see you again.
We have Marty.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
We have Doug.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for coming.
And we got BrayneGro. Was here. Yeah, he's having a little bit of bandwidth issues, but he's here. Thanks for joining us today, Nelson.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed my introduction. My wife.
Oh yeah, sorry.
My wife came in the room.
We also have Nelson from Poetry of Plants. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got started?
So I help people set up and design licensed cannabis facilities around the world. I do facility audits, so I go in and take a look at the health facility and offer a list of recommendations. I develop different kinds of technology that has to do with horticulture, indoor agriculture. Work with some really awesome people all around the world on little projects to help develop more sustainable products for cultivating cannabis and possibly cultivating other plants as well.
It's really cool. I understand you work a lot with LED producers and do a lot of lighting research. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I say work with LED lighting companies, there isn't like one specific company. I don't get a paycheck from them. So just to be clear on that, what I do like to do is get the new light on the block, right? Be the first kid to have the CD, remember those days, and give it a spin and figure out, let me make sure this is working right. Just to see what the potential is of these lights. So it started with Fluence a little while ago. They were like the first lighting company to come out with full spectrum LED light that could compete with a double-ended high pressure sodium bolt. So when they first put that light out, everyone kind of used their standard methodologies and practices for high pressure sodium and applied it to their light, and then got terrible results mostly because you had to look at the environment and all the other variables differently because you were giving more usable light to the plant. So photosynthetic rates would speed up and there was less room for error. Some of that I think has to do with light intensity. Some of it I think has to do with spectrum. And so with that, I helped Fluence out by helping some of their clients out on a friendly level, which then ultimately turned into this consulting business. I was doing this kind of R&D on different lights and different grow practices since 2008. It's really where I started to dive into the R&D aspect of cannabis cultivation and became more fascinated with that. And, the cash cropping of it became less important to me. I kind of went down the nerd hole and, had some good runs and some bad runs in the learning process. But I saw that there was a real need to improve upon what people are doing. And I also was looking at the medical markets that were popping up and kind of knew that it would be heading in this direction, but it would be a slow crawl to the end of prohibition. So there would be a lot of opportunity to develop technology, new standards with this plant, because the production of this plant missed the industrial and internet revolution. So all the technology that was involved in the industrial production of things like corn or sorghum or all these other crops, cannabis and hemp were not a part of that. So they missed a good 80 years of agricultural development, industrial development. So the way that people were cultivating it in the black market only made sense because there was a high value for the crop. But that value is going to go down on a wholesale market. We're seeing it to some extent. I'm sure there'll be little pockets where it, will have a premium rate, but it'll become a commodity. So figuring out how to increase quality, reducing input costs, being more efficient, and maintaining the same quality seemed like an interesting challenge. And that's what I've been really focused on and dedicated to doing. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. And now I get basically lighting companies will send me samples of their fixture to try out. And I've been using the Spider X Plus from Fluence as a baseline because I've gotten really good results from that. And then compare the differences, the positives and negatives of all these different fixtures that are on the market. So some of those companies are Bios. Another one is, oh God, there's another one that just sent me a light. There's so many. Spectre is another one. Pro Grow Tech. I mean, there's dozens now. I say there's probably half a dozen that have a great light. And there's a lot of room for improvement. And now you're seeing a lot of Chinese knockoffs. So it's a flooded sector at the moment, in my opinion. But in that, there's a lot of people trying to climb to the top of the hill. So I've met a lot of different lighting companies. Optic Par is another one. That's a good light. But I've met a lot of these companies that are willing to be, open to doing co-development on some features of their fixture. So that to me is exciting because it's like everyone's hungry. Everyone wants to cash in on this whole thing that's going on. And I'll use that desire for money to fund, have those companies support funding a better, more sustainable fixture that could carry into other markets as well, whether they see it or not. Sometimes they're just focused on cannabis, but there's a whole other world of plants out there, multiple worlds of plants.
So what do people look for if they're trying to tell a good LED light from a bad one?
Well, I don't want to call any LED light a bad light. I'd say maybe there are design. Yeah, I'd say that there's what we're looking at is efficiency, right? So micromoles per joule, the amount of light that's generated from the lowest amount of heat or energy. So we want that energy that's driving the light, driving the diodes to be used to make more light, not heat. That's what we don't want in some circumstances. I mean, we don't want a totally cold light because plants need a heat source. So there's a little bit of a balancing act. So I look at electrical efficiency, I look at light output, I look at spectrum, and then I look at thermal diffusion. So how that fixture will release its heat into the ambient air. Some of those things you can look at, and they should most companies will have numbers. A lot of the companies now are modeling everything off of the Fluence light because of its success, but I think there's a long way to go. So what I look at is I look at spectrum and I look at thermal diffusion. I'm less concerned with light intensity because I think we've hit the point where with the spectrum that most people are using right now, it gets the plant tired at high light levels. So it's not necessarily always about intensity. Sometimes it has to do with, all the different colors that are a part of triggering photosynthetic rates and creating, helping drive chemical production in the plant. That answer your question? I'm not sure.
I guess it's definitely a very descriptive answer. But how would one of the listeners be able to differentiate between a light that they'd want to buy over one that they wouldn't? I guess. Do you have
yes.
Maybe you have it posted or a rating or
Sure.
Sure.
We want the fixture to be waterproof above IP65. That's very important. We want the fixture to be able to be cleaned easily. Dust and organic buildup over the diodes or over the coating of the diodes is going to reduce your efficiency. Also, the fixture will run warmer, which may or may not be desirable. So I'll look at that. I'll look at the spectrum. Certain plants grow better under spectrums that have higher blue levels, and certain plants grow better under different higher red levels. So it just depends on what you're growing. So sometimes it's not necessarily good, or it has to do with its application. One of the things that if I look at a LED fixture and it has a fan on it, I immediately throw it out the window. Like I won't even look at it because the fan is a fail point. Plus, there's ways of, I mean, for thermal diffusion, surface area is the most important. So if a company's innovated on how they've increased the surface area behind the diodes to diffuse that heat, that's also something to look at. I'm seeing companies move away from those fin designs that look like a heat sink, right? You know what I'm kind of like? If you remember the Lumitech ballast, how they had all those fins on it. So that was there to increase the surface area of that ballast, so more heat would diffuse off of its surface. So a lot of companies now are moving away from that design. I think that's possibly a mistake. One of the things I like about the Fluence Light is that it has those fins. So I'm seeing that it's moving more towards a different type of surface area, and the fins are reduced. But the people that build the lighting companies, they build it in a way that a lighting company and a lighting engineer would think, but they're not really factoring in practical application and really doing a deep enough dive with the people that are working with the plant and the environments and the engineers building the room to understand how all that should work. So those are things I all kind of look at. If there's a fan on it, if it's got a poor build, not so great. I look at the diffusion rate if they have a coating over the diode, and I'm getting super technical. So again, if it's a cheap Chinese knockoff, I don't know. I mean, you're going to get what you pay for, but also be shrewd, because it doesn't cost as much to make these LED fixtures that you would assume it would be on the price tag. So there's a high markup on these fixtures. So there's a balance. I would say that you can find something for the value that will work with what you're doing in the room. Now, there's another scenario to all of this. Are you going to do a multi-layer garden design, or are you going to do a single level design, right? So multi-layered canopies, you see these rolling racks, this vertical kind of setup, which I've worked a lot in. And then there's certain fixtures that will work really well for that, and certain fixtures that won't. So it's a loaded question, is what I'm trying to say. So you got a loaded answer.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know you were very experienced with vertical growing and cannabis, and there aren't too many people that have worked much with that.
Yeah, I like it because it's a challenge, for one. The biggest challenge is the stratification of the environment based on what level or what height you're at. Because as you go up, of course, heat rises. You can get these pockets of heat, pockets of humidity. Breaking that up is really important. And I've worked with some really great engineers. We've designed different ways of doing that based on the client's budget. But it's just playing with air, getting away from wall fans, right? Wall fans are a drag. They're pretty crappy for the most part. It really, the whole multi-layer idea came out of people trying to pull a fast one initially on the regulators, right? So it's like, I got a 10,000 square foot license, bro, but if I go up, they're only counting the floor, So that's where a lot of, and that's where that idea came from with me as well. But I had been doing vertical growing for a while. And I had designed a vertical system that used 6-inch PVC tubes. And I had those horrendous high pressure sodium light tubes that were made out of glass. And I put a fan on top of it and try and figure out how to do this. And I built 3 of these things, and they were each 18 feet tall. I just had really high ceilings and not a lot of space to work in. And, figuring out how to make sure that the structure supported itself with all the water moving on the top, all these things I didn't even think of. And so I got so obsessed with that system, I forgot that I needed to grow weed and make money. But when I broke away from that and the LEDs came out, immediately started looking at them as a solution. I looked at induction lighting, all of that. But now it's become a thing because there's limited areas in certain states or counties where they're allowing the cultivation of cannabis. Not all of these areas you can have outdoor or greenhouse cultivation. So if you look at Oakland or a city like that, or Los Angeles, they've zoned certain areas for industrial use, and there's a limited amount of square footage of real estate. and the real estate is also really, really, really expensive.
Uh,
So for
Oakland is its own circus. I'm well experienced in Oakland.
Yep. So a lot of people, and also in states like I work in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, where there's regulation on how the garden can be visible. So a lot of these, states want the gardens to be invisible, and then again they're limited to a certain area. And then once cannabis regulations, the zoning for where they are going to allow it to happen, all that real estate goes up like 10x, and it's just a mad craziness of overinflated real estate property. So when people buy these buildings, maybe they get a 50 or 60,000 square foot building, but they want to figure out how to get 50 or 60,000 square feet of canopy in that building. And most people, oh God, there's a lot of people that are investing in cannabis and they're like, I bought a 50,000 square foot building, I'm going to grow 50,000 square feet of weed. And I'm like, no, you're not, bro. You're going to grow like 1/7 of that. And they're like, why? I'm like, because you got to put all this other shit in there for you actually, like, how do you think this works? He's like, we just put plants there. I'm like, no, dude. So it's a lot of that. So then they go, well, how do I get more into the space? So, typically if you can get close to 50%, 50 to 60% of your square footage of your building as flowering canopy or as cannabis canopy, plant canopy, if you do a vertical design. And that typically it's either a double stack moving or a triple stack static. And the difference is that the double stack moving moves on these rails, and they all come together in this home position. And you've got like a massive racks that can open up like an accordion and come together. You guys might have seen what those look like. Or you have fixed aisles, and then you go up taller and you shorten the vertical height. I like that method better. It's an engineering nightmare or very, very expensive to do the double stack moving. The people that are doing, there's a group called Fog City that's doing it very well, but they developed their own air circulation system, and to purchase that, it's very expensive. So I look at budgets and I look at what makes sense. So having a fixed aisle is also nice because then you get more than 2 or 3 people working in a space at one time.
Yeah, I did a lot of work when I used to work back at the Aquaponics source with vertical towers, and we actually used one of the zip grow towers, and it flooding our showroom when the roots clogged the tower, and it drained the whole system on the floor, caused all kinds of damage, burned up the pump, and we determined that we're going to make a better tower. And we did it side by sides. You can look it up online. It's called the Aqua Vertica. They don't make it anymore, but there's side by side pictures, and it allows you to remove each plant as you want and all that. And it was just there. When you get to the vertical design, it's very complicated because when you're trying to make everything even, and then not only that, regardless of how you try to do the verticals, trying to get even water spread through the different layers with the different manifolds, as I'm sure you're aware, can be challenging as well.
It's really hard. It's really hard. So I've been trying to simplify a very complex system is basically how I look at it. So it's already complex as it is with all the different variables and with a limited amount of things that we could use to combat those variables like pest or pathogen pressure. So when you have a very complicated environmental watering system, which I've played around with, you don't sleep at night because you're just checking every crack of that thing all day long to make sure that it's working right. And I think I was always interested in those zip grow towers because those are really designed for, correct me if I'm wrong, but more like leafy greens or smaller, stouter kind of plants that aren't as heavy, right?
Yeah, and like I said, there's a couple other designs that are actually better than the zip grows now that are out there. And we've talked about the company that is kind of based around zip grow called Plenty a couple of times on the show. And so one of the things that I love about them, and one of the things that I there's a lot of people that do vertical stuff that kind of get real fuzzy with their descriptions on what they're doing, but they'll claim that that company in particular claims that they're pest-free because they spray in between their rows and not on the plants directly. And it's like, I guarantee you, if I do ppm testing on then it's going to come up because that, there's enough airflow in there. Come on, like, let's just be real. Like, you're spraying the plants. Like, can we not, like, you're one of those, you don't do that. What I'm saying is there's a lot of people that in the vertical space that just ride the whole hype wave and profit off people and kind of take advantage of people and use silly things like that aren't true,
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of that. And I mean, there was a lot of that before it was medical or before it was recreational, right? So you got a lot of big fish stories. I remember always feeling like the worst, most insecure grower because I'd go into the grow shop and I'd be talking to another grower and they'd be telling me like what kind of yields they were getting with their like shitty SFV OG cut. And I'd be like, how? What am I doing wrong? It's like, how is this? But I realized that most people are just kind of full of shit and whatever, that's okay. I mean, there's like the Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer approach. You just let them be that way. But some people, the ones, Aldous Huxley said, genuineness grows like celery, only in the dark, right? So it's usually the people that are more quiet about what they're doing, that are doing cool stuff. And the real trick is like, if you're the loudest voice blowing everything that you do out of proportion, you'll never attract those people. And I learned that the hard way because I'm still a pretty fucking loud voice, but I used to be like that kind of guy. And it was a shitty existence. And once I had my like nice heaping spoonful of humble pie, I shifted how I developed and built like healthy relationships in this sector, at least, because it's been, it's a minefield, and there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of cavemen, and I just think that at the same time there's been a lot of like amazing innovation that's happened without there being a regulation thumb over you. And there's something really special and important to be distilled from this whole experience that cannot be lost, because it's that spark when you're in a space of freedom. And even though we were growing cannabis illegally or under prohibition, however you want to call it, there was always this cloud of anxiety and fear.
We prefer the term less than legal.
Less than legal, sure. Whatever they call it. It's all just a war of words anyway. Everyone's just made these things up and puts sounds to them. So really it's interesting. But the whole thing is that I've had some of the most beautiful moments in that world with other people creating things and discovering things and having those like, just like, damn, this is fucking awesome. Like, how did that happen? You know what I mean? And it's like, I used to play a lot of music, and it was similar to that feeling when you're jamming and that jamming turns into like a badass song or a really great melody. And that can be had in the garden as well. And what I like to try and inspire, even working on these big licensed corporate grows, is that don't become too much like that. Like, acknowledge the fact that there's a spark of creativity that made this plant special, because you're not just selling a plant, you're selling an experience. And every single plant, it could be the same strain grown differently, will create its own unique and subtle experience. And that's fucking beautiful, like, we don't want that to die. Like, anybody that like just wants to turn it into a block of cheese, like, fuck you, man. It's like,
speaking of which, cheese, that was the first one that was attempted to be patented, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
Big Buddha.
Yeah, that's right.
Big Buddha Seeds tried to patent cheese, even though he didn't remotely actually develop the strain.
Yeah, that's the other part of it, right? So there's been a lot of thievery, but that's why regulation can be a good thing. So there's like, creating a set of rules that everyone abides by is a great thing. The problem is when regulation creates an unfair advantage for other people. And the traditional market, right, the less than legal market, will always be there unless there's access for people like all of us in this room to be able to enter the market and play ball. And what's that?
Look at the California rollout.
Oh, I live here, man. I know a lot about what's going on.
Yeah,
you know,
they used to be the biggest producing state, and growers around the state are just either giving up or going full black market because they can't even get a license. People that are trying to go legit can't are
yep.
being denied, and it's bullshit.
Well, so it's to let's be more succinct because we can easily call it all bullshit. But really, what we need to do is put some light on the cause and effect, right? So, like, why it's not like I can sit here and go, "This is so fucked up," but the solution is in going, "Well, why is it fucked up?" Right? And go ahead. Sorry, I can talk a lot.
No. I was just going to say the number one thing, and we've talked about it extensively on this show, is local control.
Yeah. Well, that goes in tandem with state control. Local. Uh, so the big issue is education, right? Education on all fronts. So you've got the local control can be problematic because you could have two camps, one that are for it, and then others who are not, who don't understand what it is because they were brainwashed. And maybe they're not willing or capable of opening their minds. LSD in the municipal water could change all of that, but I'm not recommending that at all. I'm just saying that's a possible solution that no one should ever do. That would be a terrible, terrible thing. but so I'm gonna get everybody in trouble. Just joking. Um, and then the other thing is education for the state and the local counties to understand like what the value of the crop is and how young it is and how we don't really understand what the value of it is yet, and to start throwing like crazy regulations on it that no other agricultural industry follows. I mean, Fish and Game has killed Humboldt County, and I mean, like if their compost pile was a couple inches off or a foot off from what they said it was, they're taking away people's licenses. And it's just like, what are you doing? Like, do you know what you're doing? All you're doing is you're pushing it back into the shadows. And like, no one wants the fucking MedMen weed, it's boof. Like, it's like people want the weed from the fucking generations of people that are growing it that know what's good. There's like a lineage there.
MedMen just tried to patent the word cannabis for use on T-shirts.
I know. It's just, it's, I don't know. Maybe I take it too personal, but at the same time, it's like, dude, they're Brads and Chads, it's like, man, can't we have something be a little punk rock for a little while without someone coming in and turning it into fucking Coca-Cola?
And to be fair, at least some of the fish and wildlife stuff was warranted because
Sure.
I was up on the Klamath, and some of the shit that I saw was really pissed me the fuck off. That's some of the other growers were doing mostly but there was a lot of cartel guys up there. There's a lot of and to a lesser extent even the Native American people that are just using bottled stuff and just dumping shit on the side of the hillside, and it's like, what the fuck, guys? Like, I don't understand that. Anyways, it's just from
no. I mean, all that. I mean, I'm. It's just we live in a world of extremes now, right?
Exactly. It's gotten way too far. Like the water restrictions there, are just way too far. And how much they try to micromanage the water tables. None of these guys are growing more than 400 plants. Like it's pretty hard to grow more than that legally. So how much water is that really? We're talking about half a gallon per plant per day over the course of a grow season. We'll just use that as an average. That's not that much water out of the whole water table over the course of a couple hundred growers. You know what I mean?
I honestly think that the solution to all of it should have been a strict management of licensed canopy allowances, to where most people were not growing 10,000 square feet of canopy. Like there was a select few. Most of the people were growing. They had like somewhere like 20 to 100 lights, or they had like their 99 plot acre of plants, right? And everyone can make a decent living, and there's variety and a chance to innovate. But I think it was now the cat's out of the bag and it's moved towards, I don't know, dude, it's crazy. I just look at how much energy is being generated and some of these I mean, I work on some of them, you know, where they're like, we need a 5 megawatt substation. I'm just like, you know, like now I'm thinking like maybe cannabis shouldn't be grown indoors or in a greenhouse at all, and only in the parts of the world where it grows well naturally with the least amount of energetic input, because that would still probably be enough to meet the actual demand of each state. If you're in a state where you don't have the environment, that's fine. But I'm seeing like the kind of, you know, the plants that grow up in Humboldt all the way down to Sonoma, like the environment here is just really epic for certain varietals where you can just grow some of the highest quality product without having to put a ton of energy inputs into it. And I've worked on so many of these projects and I'm trying my hardest to reduce the energy footprint, but it's still just so much. I mean, you're building factories. They are factories and they are large scale factories.
And
here's a
question for you on that note. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. I'm ranting.
How long do you think that indoor can survive? Because on that note, because with the collapsing pricing on flower, short of you being in, say, Alaska, how long is indoor really going to survive as a financially viable production method? Because I think it's going to not be viable, and that's giving it some, you know.
No, I don't know. So I think that indoor will be the place where a lot of quality will get grown because it's going to become turned into a commodity. So you're going to see a lot of lower grade mass produced flower because no one's figured out how to grow this at scale well, right? Except like the small greenhouse growers or small outdoor growers or small indoor growers. So I think that there's going to be a market for really, really good indoor, but I don't think there has to be as much as what people are trying to produce. That's kind of my thought. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's special. I think it's unique. I think there's a lot of R&D that can happen there. I think our understanding of the plant can be, I mean, there's certain things you can do, you know, drive specific chemical production by simulating an environment. That's awesome. Is there a reason to scale it yet? Maybe, I don't know, but we don't even know how to scale it. And I think it should probably go like row crop. I did 7 acres of hemp and, you know, some of the flower turned out really great. And if it was in a better environment, it would come out really well. And the cost to produce it is low and the environmental impact is low. There's ways of doing all of that. So I just think that people are like still stuck in one paradigm. And then there's this like speculator paradigm. And then there's big ag, and all three of them are like going in different directions. So I think that there'll be a place for all of it. Just I don't know what the volume of it should be, if that makes sense.
Sure. So what kind of, you specialize more in organic type production or more sustainable type production? Do you want to talk about some of your methodology?
Sure. So I wouldn't say that I specialize in any organic or however we want to call it synthetic. I'll try and learn as much as I can about all of it because I think there's a value to all of it. I don't have a zealous religious temperament when it comes to people's inputs unless they're like doing serious damage to the environment and you can actually show the data that that's happening. Like shouldn't be dumping nitrates and phosphates down the drain or into the groundwater. No, should not be happening. Like I like to really blend all of it. So I've actually been working with a NASA polymer scientist. He worked on developing a fertilizer for that would work in space, in outer space, and he developed a polymer coated controlled release that inside of it is, you know, the raw minerals for the plants that get released through this polymer exchange. But after the life, we can target those nutrients to be spent at the end of the plant's life. So we know, like, let's say the plant's going to be alive for 120 days. We add what it needs for 120 days. There's a time on it, and the only thing that's left in the soil is microbes that then can be reused. So there's certain things like that. And then I use organics mainly for as a source of biostimulation, like to drive the plant to do different things, also to feed the fungi, feed the microbes. All that's really important. That's a whole, like, I think we're all driving in the dark to some extent. I don't think we know why it's doing certain things yet. I think we understand like a surface level of it. But the more soil scientists that I meet, the more I realize how little I know, and they're pretty honest about how little they know. So I feel like there's like a whole ocean to be discovered and all of that. So that's very exciting. And there's a synergy with organic inputs that are really important. So I kind of look at all different methodologies, and for certain contexts, certain ones make sense. I think that if you can lightly supplement, your plants and then mainly use what's around you locally, I think that's probably one of the coolest things. There's a guy named Jesse Dodd, BioVortex, who does that up in Eureka. And that guy is such a fucking badass, and he grows some of the best looking flowers. And I'm pretty sure that 100% of all his inputs are like a part of his garden that he's growing or producing all year round. But again, hard to do at scale. That's awesome to do if you've got like 100 plants. So when we're looking at scaling it, I try and blend all of those things. Also with organic inputs, it's a renewable resource, but it takes a lot of space to renew that resource. And also most of these organic amendment companies may or may not be allowing their products to mature in the time needed to be ready for market because of the demand for their product. So there's a lot of, like, I've gotten a lot of soil samples and different blends from different companies where it's like, hey, where did all these heavy metals come from? Or where did the cladosporium and aspergillosis come from? Right out of the bag. So because we're limited on what we can use for biocontrols or chemical controls, it's usually a balance of everything in between, and I'm making sure that I'm getting my organic inputs from trusted sources.
So what microbials or microbial inoculants are you rocking these days?
So there's this product that I got to help work on a little bit. I did like, maybe it was more like I smoked a bong rip with a buddy of mine who had a cricket farm. And I was telling him about this white paper about how chitinase producing bacteria can drive terpene production and drive like a stress response in the plant. So I had asked him like what he was doing with all his cricket shells and what was the chitin level of that. So he developed a product called Root, which I think is a blend of like 10 or 12 different insect basically exoskeletons, and then it's like mixed with a beneficial bacteria cocktail, and that's one of the cool products that I like to use, and mainly just really clean worm castings from a trusted source. I've gotten worm castings a lot from Organics Alive, and there's a couple local farms here, and then there's a couple other types of things that I throw in there to add to that, like malted grain, organic 2-row malted grain ground up, which has 4 or 5 different enzymes in it that work well with all of it. And just brew casting tea. It's pretty simple. So not the only thing that would be special would be the 2-row grain and the 2-row malted grain and the Root, which is that chitinase producing bacteria. I was really looking to like get crawfish shells at some point and crawfish emulsion, and he had an aquaponic. My buddy who started Root had an aquaponic setup where he had a crawfish garden, but that was challenging because the crawfish like to like fight each other all the time. So it's like but using things like lobster meal, crawfish meal, shellfish meal. Always interested me because some of the best outdoor flower I smoked had come from guys that were using those inputs, and I wanted to know why. So
very cool. Have you done anything else? Have you done any other work with aquaponics?
Only with Elliot over there at his farm. He had a very complex aquaponics setup that I observed more than worked with. It was complex. I've seen some very large aquaponic setups, but they looked like they would cost a lot of money. And on a small scale, I always had trouble controlling the water temperature without needing to run, some kind of a chilling system or cool coils or something like that. but I never fully dove into it. Elliot has. Elliot would be a great guy to have on the show too, just because he tinkered around with aquaponics setup. I think he set up the aquaponics setup for THC Design, which is a big brand in LA, where he just had different kinds of fish, and he was using the emulsion and growing like sprouts and wheatgrass, and we did a couple of cannabis plants. And the vegetative growth from aquaponics is, second to none. There was always a little bit of a challenge on driving more potassium to the plants in aquaponics, which was needed for flowering. Like nitrogen was an easy thing. Potassium seemed to be a little harder.
Yep. So I spent about since about 2012 or 2013. Well, late 2012, working on that problem. So.
Well, I'd love to hear about your work on that at some point. That's
sure. So I guess the biggest thing with aquaponics is just doing the dual root zone planting. So you have a soil layer and getting the benefit of that soil mycorrhizal and mycorrhizal network. And terrestrial microbes had a whole bunch of benefits, particularly in regards to lignin-producing crops. We did a lot of testing with both fruit trees, woody bushes, like berry-producing bushes, and cannabis, all three of them. And we found that specifically the mycorrhizal networks play a huge role in those types of crops in particular. Also in fighting fungal infections. So, for example, if you do dual root zone cucumbers or zucchini, which typically are very susceptible to powdery mildew and a couple of other fungal infections in aquaponics, specifically because of the higher humidity, made a huge difference, along with higher silica levels. Silica is often not emphasized in aquaponics production for whatever reason or another. It's just not. It isn't hydro, but just not aquaponics. I don't know why. But to date, there are a lot of the typical people that put out books or do classes don't talk about silica. And when we did tissue sampling, what was real interesting is when we did tissue sampling, originally there was a big-time tomato producer in Boulder when I worked at the aquaponics source, and we grew a bunch of tomatoes in the laboratory, and we had him taste them and do bricks testing, and we did nutrient testing through CU. And what we found was, against stuff we grew in soil controls with the same seeds or clones off the same plants, was the silica and the chloride was lower in the aquaponics system versus the soil. So once we started supplementing higher chloride levels and higher silica levels, we were able to reproduce those, not only the bricks level, but also the flavor, and get much better flavor profiles out of our aquaponic plants in particular.
How are you adding calcium in the aquaponic setup?
So it depends. Now, if the pH is already balanced, I'll add calcium sulfate. If the pH needs to go up, I'll add calcium carbonate, or I'll add calcium magnesium carbonate. If it's a smaller adjustment, I'll add that because it's more of a slower release, not quite so quick. Or if it's on a really large system, once in a blue moon, I'll use calcium hydroxide. But I prefer to use calcium carbonate because I can build up that carbonate buffer and maintain a more stable pH overall. Yes, I will have the issues with some of the alkalinity and dealing with the buffer, but to me, coming from the aquarium world, I'm used to dealing with that all the time anyway. So mentally, for me, it's much easier for me to calculate everything. So I prefer to have that much more stable pH and keep everything like 6.6, 6.4. And deal with that higher range of pH than people do in hydro.
Yep.
Still in that wide range of nutrient availability.
Have you gotten leaf tissue tests done after increasing the silica levels?
Yeah, so it takes, the best one we found was silicon dioxide, but potassium silicate is also a really good one. Again, with silicon dioxide, you get such a shitty conversion rate. It's really poor as far as immediate bioavailability, but it was the one that increased the tissue samples the most, I guess, with the volumes we were testing at the time. But generally, what I tell people for pH up is just to alternate their potassium. Instead of using potassium carbonate or potassium bicarbonate for pH up, when they alternate potassium and calcium for pH up, which is traditionally done in aquaponics, to instead of using potassium carbonate or potassium bicarbonate, to use potassium silicate. And you can gradually build up that silica level up to, at least 60, but for cannabis, 80 to 130 ppms. Keeps that pH, helps stabilize the pH, but it also gives you that bioavailable silica that really helps the plants quite a bit.
Have you noticed?
The other thing I've noticed, I'm going to interrupt you, but the other thing I've noticed as well, when you keep silica levels above 60 parts per million for, say, lettuce producers, so you're not a cannabis producer, you're listening to the show, and you just do a lot of large-scale lettuce production or even basil production, increasing the silica levels above 60% not only reduced bacterial leaf spot, it also reduced powdery mildew infections in the plants, and it also increased the crispness and the shelf life of the plants. They didn't wilt quite as quickly once they went to shelf, once they went to market.
So I was there's a soil biologist friend of mine who was telling me that I didn't get into why this is yet, but he said that with increased levels of silica, that it will replace the functions of calcium to some extent in the plant. Oh, I lost you. There you are. So I was wondering if on any of your leaf tissue tests, have you noticed, like, as you increase the silica, whether you get a reduction in calcium?
I have not looked at the correlation of that, but I can definitely go back and look at my data and see if there's a correlation.
And then, have you used like a product like Power SI, which I think is called like salicylic acid? I think that's how you pronounce it. And I've heard I haven't used it yet, but I've heard a lot of people say that it's like more bioavailable. I don't know if that's true or not.
So I have not worked with any of the salicylic acids or the monosalicylic or the there's an ammonia molybdenate or salicylic acid or something like that. I have not worked with those particularly because of how that particularly works with fish.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, it's got to be tricky balancing the mineral content for the water without hurting the fish. I mean, that was like I know that I've seen they can go wrong. Yeah. Do you use...
The only product I've ever had where I literally poured in like ungodly amounts to date was Mammoth P. They sent me like a 5-gallon bucket worth, and I think we put at least 3 gallons into a 10-gallon aquarium of that with a goldfish in it, and they survived. So I think that was the best LD50 we've ever had in all my testing.
Yeah. Did you notice any difference in the plants with that?
Oh no, so that was strictly an LD50 on the fish.
It was just a toxicity test, like how much is going to take the code.
No, I have found that regardless of whether or not using Mammoth P or there's a couple of other companies now that use phosphorus bioavailability, increasing microbes, it definitely dramatically improves aquaponic systems and seems to have zero effect on anything else in the system.
Very cool.
Yeah, especially for getting tighter lettuce heads or better production out of your flowering crops. How
big is your aquaponics farm?
So I'm a consultant similar to you.
Okay.
I worked with the biggest farm personally I worked with was I did a bunch of work with Regenerative Incorporated up in Toronto, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Yeah.
Food and sustainable stuff. So they're the biggest farm that I worked with as far as square footage. But I also worked with Ouroboros. Used to work for Aquaponic Source. I worked with a group in Jamaica, another group in Puerto Rico that is now destroyed after the hurricane. They had one of the few people to get one of the 13 license holders before the hurricane, and got smashed. So,
oh man,
so
that's very cool.
But yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I'd like to see more aquaponics farms for any crop. I mean, just to understand. You know, I've been like in the sub-chamber areas where they have all the water going through it. It's like, wow.
What's really cool is that they did a NASA study, so I'm sure they were involved with some of the work that you're doing, where they did biological samples. I think it was 66 aquaponics farms and a couple of aquaculture farms. And they're looking at what is the microbes that are important, say, for nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whatever. What food chains do we need to bring with us if we go to Mars or the moon or whatever? And what they found was not a single one of them had a similar food web as far as how the microbes break down.
Not a singular one of them?
Not a single one.
Wow.
So if we think that soil microbial stuff is complex, like I'm sure soil is just as complex, and people need to think of it more in that context, is that just because you don't have the same microbes as the guy that has the best bud ever doesn't mean that your stuff can't be the best bud ever. Like we get so stuck on saying, oh, do I have the nutrients that guy used? Or, oh, am I doing the same method? And it's not. It doesn't matter. As long as you're doing everything right in a probiotic way, and you're not trying to nuke your microbes in your soil, you can still end up with a food web that is superior to the guy that got first place at whatever it is that you're upset about, and do a much better job. That's one of the things we emphasize on with the aquaponics, with the dual root zone, having half soil and then having flood and drain in the bottom, is that you can get the aquatic food web and the terrestrial food web and actually get better resistance for things like mold and things like that to the plant system, because it gets exposed to more things all at the same time, and it gets exposed to two separate food webs, so it has more options for breaking down microbes and breaking down nutrients, and all in ways that allow you to still use lower nutrient levels. So it gives you the best benefit. But just getting even normal soil or even normal hydroponic growers to think on that level and say, hey, like, change the way that you're thinking, because there's nobody even in an aquaponic setting that has the same food webs. Better yet, what you're doing in soil, and soil we know is even more diverse. So, it's just something that really people need to kind of focus on, and that's why I love people like going out and harvesting their own indigenous microorganisms and things like that locally. I don't know what your thoughts are on some of the KNF methods. Maybe you want to talk about that. If you do any on a commercial scale, it doesn't make as much sense, but definitely on a home scale.
Yeah, I think well, all right. I have mixed feelings about all that. I like regenerative farming, I guess would be the way of calling it. I know that there's like a manual from Master Cho that a lot of people read and swear by. I just think that I see a lot of people trying to do it indoors, and I think that's the big problem I have. I think that methodology really works outside with the sun, with all the biodiversity around. Because if we talk about fungal networks, like that's what you really want to tap into when you're using that kind of a methodology, that practice. There's a few farms I've worked with that just really knock it out of the park, but it's outside. Anybody that I've seen like do it inside, there's like one or two that have done a really good job with it. But man, it's a lot of work. You gotta like really love doing that, and you're like married to your cover crop. But I think it's really, again, Jesse Dodd is like one of those guys that really just kills it. Green Life Production does a great job with it. I've been in a lot of farms though that struggle with it, and I usually switch them over to pots and get them on something really simple, with can be organic inputs or whatever. I mean, because if you're married to like one methodology but it's not working for you, then you're not going to have a business for very long. And the best thing to do is, if there's a craft, I think, if you like want to develop something, a KNF methodology or regenerative farm methodology indoors, as a passion project, go for it. I just think that works better, way better outside. And I do a little bit of that in my backyard as well. So that's the fun stuff, because you're really working with everything that's available, and then that's in your local environment, and then that flower or that produce, whatever you're growing, is going to have its own unique kind of twist, right, to whatever was growing around there. So I think that's super cool. And also you're learning about so many other different kinds of plants, just focused on one plant. I think there's a lot of value to that. And I think there's a lot more to be discovered, or maybe it's like at some level, just ancient knowledge that we've forgotten about or gotten lazy on recalling. But inside, I wouldn't recommend it, just because it's really hard to have big soil beds and not have a microclimate underneath your canopy that's a breeding zone for botrytis and powdery mildew. And it's just, we're so limited until there's like maybe a light or some system that really can zap all of it. But the whole thing is like, you want a diverse bacterial and fungal environment. And then if you have a sanitary environment around that, I don't know how that works. You've got levels of sanitation that are going to be putting pressure on what you want that are beneficial The other thing is that most of the bacteria and fungus that are in the initial part of the composting process are not anything we want on our flowers. We want that to mature and go through a maturation process. And I'm sure there's people that have figured out ways of speeding that up with like those lacto bacillus and enzyme and all these other kinds of things, which I think is cool. But again, you know, I think there's like a local farm practice to it. But I've seen a lot of them fail testing too.
That's definitely a big problem, especially in some California and Oregon with the biologicals. They just test total CFUs instead of actually testing gram negatives.
Yes. Yeah. So that's, again, back to the education. So there's just not enough knowledge yet. So some growers or cannabis cultivators are just light years ahead of where the system is. And the system hasn't even put on its diaper yet. So.
Oh, yeah. I'm working with a group in Texas, and some of the questions that they've asked me have almost fallen out of my chair.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's just, it is what it is. I just try and stay humble and try and continue to educate people and also try and laugh along the way. Like I laugh at myself all the time. Like I've been a total fool. If we can't laugh at ourselves through this process a little bit, I mean, that's like everyone takes everything so seriously. It's like, come on, man.
We have so much suffering. Like
Yeah.
for real though, like the industry is a meat grinder, and you survive it or you don't.
Yeah, it is. You know, and if you learn from a loss, it's not a loss, it's a lesson, right? There's some Jay-Z boom. But you know, so it's my whole life has been full of losses, and it only became a real loss when I didn't look at why it was a loss, right? Once you look at why didn't that work out? I mean, that's what life is. It's a series of improvements. You know, a series of like trying to hit the bullseye and just being off, right? And then you hit it, and then you're off to the next bullseye. And there's a whole other string of losses to be had. So it's, you know, that's just how it is. So enjoy it. And, you know, I try and be there for the people. I try and just keep people from losing money and losing their ass. Like I've told people flat out, like there would have been maybe a 2-year contract for me to work with them. And I've said, no, please don't do this. Don't go into this business. Don't do it. And I'm going to write you a report on why. And they're looking at me like I'm fucking nuts because it's like they're paying me a check. I'm like, no, there's not a check here because it's like, it's just you know, you guys are just going to lose a ton of money and it's not going to be a happy experience. Like you can if you want to, but like,
I'm sure you've also walked into a grow, and by the end of the first day consulting, lost count of the number of felonies you watched them commit, and a whole bunch of other shit. You know, obviously we don't talk about those, but
yeah.
But I'm sure you've had that too, and it's like, you know, I've definitely walked into at least 2 or 3 grows where it's just like I can't be involved with any of this. Like I don't even want to check from you. Like I'm just gonna leave. like I don't even want my name tied with this. Like wow.
What I usually go through like a pre-qualification process for the most part, and then if something like that happens, it's just I'll wrap up what I need to wrap up, and that'll be it. You know, just because.
Or you walk into a grow and you're like, I've never seen 6 different types of mites in one grow before. Or, how the fuck did you get scale in this grow?
Well, so I'll tell you guys I can tell you guys a couple stories without naming any names that are kind of interesting. And I'll tell you what the moral of this story is. Don't ever piss off your IPM manager who happens to be like an entomologist by trade, because entomologists are studying insects all day long. Like we study plants, and some of them have like the worst resistant russet and broad mite collections that they work on understanding the resistances, right? So rule of thumb, don't piss off your entomologist. There was one grow, very big grow, licensed, kind of had one foot in each market, if you know what I mean. And they just were not doing well financially, primarily because the people at the top had never run a business before. Next thing you know, they have like, you know, $300 million at their disposal. But that's like walking into a gym, never lifting a weight and trying to like squat 1,000 pounds. Like, good luck. So, and they, from my understanding of it, is they didn't pay their entomologist, their IPM manager, for like a month, and then like let him go. And there was like, I guess like a $40,000 or $50,000 paycheck that he never got. So on his last day, he released strategically in the garden in the areas where, and this was probably, I'm going to say that this, I got to be careful about how I say it so much, but I'd say this garden was somewhere between 150,000 square feet and 500,000 square feet of canopy, straight up. All right. That's just to show you it's big, like more than an acre. And he strategically placed russet mites, broad mites, thrips, and two-spotted spider mites that had been like the most resistant that he had bred into targeted areas of the garden where he knew there was less looks, like people. And I had gone down there like 3 months prior, and everything was fine, looked great. And this guy gets fired, and a month later I come down, and it was like, I'm looking at a couple million plants and they had to start fucking everything over. And I was just like, wow. And a lot of the people that were working there just jumped ship because it was just a bloodbath, right? So that's like things that people wouldn't even think about. Another thing I've seen too is like a lot of farms getting pollinated by hemp pollen. And it's like
the biggest one I've seen is russets, and then like really just psychotic IPM plants.
Yeah, russets are really terrible. I've never fully I've suppressed them, but I've had them twice before. But the only way I ever got rid of them was to kill every plant and start over. Like really, where I wasn't suppressing them. Or like where there wasn't some evidence of them being somewhere.
Even beneficial mites.
I tried it but indoors. It was all indoors. Very difficult. Greenhouse, the beneficial insects work a lot better, but indoors, with a crew of people that I was not running the grow. I worked for the company as a consultant, so I had given them a lot of recommendations. And a few of them were taken and some of them were not. But they were going and they would release the beneficial insects and they would suppress it. It's just something that the beneficial insects are really good as a preventative. But when you have a problem explode overnight, I haven't seen it work as like, I've only seen, something like sulfur worked well on suppressing them, But really, the best thing to do is just not have that problem. And when you have that problem, localize it and just take the loss instead of taking like a recurring loss. I'd rather take 100% loss of a quarter of my whole grow than take 25% or 20% loss over 2 or 3 years on the entire grow. Like there's just risk mitigation on some of these things. And people think that they can beat it, but it's like when you've got, 25,000 plants in a facility, that's like it's hard. It's hard not for something to happen. So I like starting from tissue culture or seed, like not doing the clone game at all anymore, to reduce that chance and not bring anything into the garden that hasn't come through tissue culture.
So how big of an issue have you found viral infections with tissue culture?
Oh man, it's a problem. There's a lot of it's not as big as maybe everyone thinks it is, but you definitely find those plants that have that issue. And there's just a lot of like not really great healthy genetics out there. So it's, again, there's a whole SOP when you're intaking new plant material to make sure that It doesn't have those issues. And if it has a virus, it goes to a virologist if we want to spend the money on it, or a plant pathogen. If it's like any kind of like a fusarium or something like that. There's a weaponized form of fusarium that this sounds like conspiracy theory talk, but Florida, it was developed by the government. It was released in Florida. There's New York Times articles on it, so you can read about it. And it was used to target cannabis plants in Florida, and developing a program to take out poppy production in Afghanistan. So it's an advanced form of fusarium, and we have discovered it in tissue culture. And it is nasty. It kills your plants in 24 hours. It's like, if it gets it, goodbye. I've seen like whole gardens go down with it.
We've talked also about the government spraying wheat crops in the 70s or 80s with poison. I forget what, we've talked about that on the show, God, it's probably 10 or 20 episodes ago, about when they intentionally sprayed chemicals on the weed to try and trick people into thinking that there was, poison on it and stuff.
Man, it wouldn't surprise me. There's a good book about the history of cannabis called Smoke Signals. I don't know if you guys have read it, but they talk a lot about like the government's tinkering with cannabis and other things that are fairly documented. But it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I don't know.
It's MK Ultra, the most.
Yeah, MK Ultra.
And then and what was the one where they sprayed drugs in the air over the Midwest?
Yes. Yeah, no, they tried to weaponize THC as like
THC acetate, which is 300 times stronger. And there's what's the name of the book that has the synthesis on it?
I don't know.
Hold on a minute. Give me a minute. I can look this up. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the government was trying to like use it as a passive to like pacify another army. That was like, at least in that book, Smoke Signals. But I thought that was kind of interesting. But back to what we were talking about as far as just certain things that I've seen. I mean, yeah, I've seen more people struggling than winning right now. Is how I would say it. And when I see someone that's winning and has a great garden, sometimes it's hard to really trust why. Like, how is it looking this good? And I want to dig in just because I see the challenges that people have at scale. This is at scale. I'm not talking about someone that's got less than 5,000 square feet of canopy. Like, I see a lot of great looking gardens that size. But when you like are at an acre of canopy, and there's not a single bug on it, I think it's just you're gonna get those things. That's just a part of the process at scale. You just want to make sure that there's enough biodiversity there, and that it's not like russet mites or broad mites. I had growing the hemp this year. There was something like 70,000 plants out in the field, and I'd walk by one plant that is completely decimated by bugs, and all the plants around it were fine. And I didn't spray once. I just watered it and tilled and amended the soil properly for the fertility of the plant. And was there some loss? Yeah, there was some loss. The most loss that we incurred was from ground squirrels chewing up the adolescent plants and rabbits. That was unexpected. And I'd say that we had the least amount of loss to insects, but that was because there was wasps and bees and all these other predator insects that were out there just naturally part of that whole circle of life. But there wasn't like one massive explosion of one thing. I think the one thing I would be concerned of is something like fusarium, because I see fusarium, if you have unhealthy soil, some root-borne pathogen, something of that sort that's coming into the water. I've seen that destroy crops, decimate crops. And so there's ways of cleaning the water, with high levels of oxygen that can decontaminate any of those kinds of things. And that's stuff that I'm looking into right now, because I think that we're probably going to be we're always going to have to like purify the water to some extent at this point on the planet. It's like there's going to have to be some levels of purification that go into some of our inputs, unless you're just in like a really rare untouched place. But no matter what, there's like something funky going on that needs some technology to help clean up. I mean, I'm assuming that you probably purify or filter your water to some extent for your aquaponic setups. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
Do at least the bare minimum a cold sterile, but usually a carbon filter as well, or if it's real bad water in RO.
Got it. Yeah, I've been in I lived in LA for a while, and sometimes the water out of the tap, municipal water, was like at 800, 900 parts per million. And it's just like, what's in here, you know? Like, so yeah, I think that there's ways of doing it efficiently, and those are all like interesting challenges that could lead into some, you know, bigger opportunities like I was discussing before. So just when I see these people that are scaling without really factoring in all the variables, and then having to figure out those problems on such a large scale is really, really tough. So if I can come in and help people figure out pieces of it, which lighten that load, then, you know, job well done. It's a good day. And those things will add up at some point. But so many people are looking at like a 3-year return on investment. It's really tough. It's really tough. I feel for a lot of these growers, you know, it's a tough job.
You know, it's funny to me to come on from someone that has 1 foot in the aquaponics world. I work with a lot of organically certified cannabis or vegetable producers aside from the cannabis growers I work with, and it's real interesting to see like what is a ROI on their end versus the cannabis industry and the amount of regulation. Some days it's almost refreshing to work on the organic certified systems because it's literally less regulation than the cannabis ones. Like it's like, oh cool, like I have half the regulations to worry about in my head right now, and it's kind of weird, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't have you're not trying to make a couple $100 per square foot. I think the margin's like what, 25 cents to $1, something like that. That's what they're looking. Is it more than that?
Much higher than that. Yeah, I mean, most lettuce boards are going to get $30 to $65, you know, per board. Maybe $80 per board for a 4x2.
Really? That's pretty good.
Yeah, because you're going to get anywhere from $1.25 to $4 per thing, depending on what you're growing, obviously.
Got it. Yeah, it depends on what you grow. Because I know like tomatoes took a hit a while ago.
Tomatoes, particularly in aquaponics, can be rough because they require so much meat. Like they're super labor intensive because you got to pull so much vegetation out of them.
Yeah, I feel like cannabis is similar to that, being labor intensive, and it's why I like to flower immature plants and not go for this like long veg. Doesn't make sense to me because it's so much labor. And
that's a concept I teach a lot. I've been teaching that concept for a long time. Shorter. We talked about that on the show many times about shorter veg times. Yeah.
So what do you like for a veg time then? 1 to 2 weeks or less than that even?
Are you talking to Roger or me?
No, to you.
Oh,
sorry.
I mean, it depends on how much veg time I can have, but no longer than 14 days. 10 days is my favorite, pretty much. Like I've gotten stellar yields with a 10-day veg, and you know, anywhere from 1.5 to 2.25 plants per square foot. So just a higher concentration of plants, and then less pruning. You're just basically opening up for airflow and for light penetration down at the bottom, but you're not really pulling a ton of the bud sites off. Like why grow it if you're going to pull it off? That's like such a waste. I see all these plants where they grow it to like 4 feet tall. They flip it into flower. It's like 7 feet tall, 6 feet tall, and they like take off half of the bud sites down below.
On that note, what is your opinion on schwazing?
I think
I think it's I don't know. I don't see a lot of plants that are schwazed that the flowers look good. Like maybe there's some thought to the airflow moving through the branches stimulates hormone production and chemical production. There's been like the hypothesis of that, but I've tried it and I didn't notice any difference. And I think what those guys are doing is they've developed a methodology that also involves their nutrient line, and I think that they're probably like dumping a ton, like they're over fertilizing the shit out
Yep.
of the plant. And the schwazing helps them because if you saw the leaves, they'd probably be all cooked anyway. So it's like, it's a good way to hide your mineral deficiencies, you know. I love not doing that. I like a stress training, and then pruning around the stress training. I like sculpting the plant, but pulling off all the leaves. When I see people do that, I'm just like, dude, what are you doing?
That was
Here.
they're just burning the shit out of the plant until they need to pull the leaves off so people don't tell, and then, oh look, it's growing great. Well, yeah, when we grow, it's going to look great once it's adjusted to this insane nutrient.
Yeah. It's like maybe you should be a bamboo farmer. That's like,
Yeah.
So
what are some of the other, I guess, tips or things you see people do majorly wrong in the larger scale grows?
run their humidity too low. I see that a lot. Like, my room. Oh, I lost you again. I wonder if it's me. I'm gonna try something real quick here. Nope, it's not me. I lost you, Steven.
Oh, we can still hear.
We can still hear you, man.
Okay, cool. All right. I see a lot of people I like run their humidity at like 40%, and just not understanding the principles of vapor pressure differential and how the plant needs. I guess it depends on the plant, but most plants don't do well at 40. No, most cannabis plants don't do well at 40% humidity. And I've grown it at all different levels of humidity, but the best has always been, anywhere between 55 and 70%. So that's one of the things that I see people do wrong a lot. Overwatering the plants. That's like one of the biggest rookie mistakes that I still see, where people are overwatering the plants. Oh my God, I got to think about just the plant space. Sometimes plant spacing doesn't make any sense. Like you have to imagine how the plant's going to grow. You have to see the canopy before it's filled out. So when you look at the plant, you want to make sure that you're not imagining it's going to do something it's not going to do. So I see that happen a lot. People running their lights too bright too soon. You have to meet the plant where it's at in its maturity level. I also see people do bad pruning practices, or bad cloning practices, and then the mom after a certain amount of rounds of cloning on a mom, the leaf structure changes and the node spacing changes, and then that plant's looking pretty tired. That's not going to be a great quality flower. If you've taken 20 rounds of clones off your mom and then you flower it, you're not going to get great results from that, in my opinion. I think a lot of people would agree with that.
What is it that you attribute that to? Out of curiosity.
Oh, you're cutting up the plant. You're cutting up. Yeah, it's tired. A genetic degradation. There's no such thing as genetic drift. That's a made-up term. It's stoner science. But you're just basically beating the plant up, and its genes will express differently, but it just doesn't have the same vigor, right? You're gonna lose vigor. If I beat you up every day, Stephen, which I never would do because I just met you. I'm not that kind of guy. But if you look at these MMA fighters, some of them look like they've been hit on the head quite a bit. So it's they've lost their sense. That you're doing that to the plant too. So you really, when you start seeing the leaves start to grow smaller and the nodal spacing get tighter and the plant gets woody, super woody, that's time to get rid of that plant. Time to head to the compost pile. I see a lot of people not testing their soil before using it. That's a problem if they're getting a soil blend. I've seen people pee on their plants before. Don't do that. It's a bad idea.
You gotta ferment it at least.
Ed Rosenthal said, yeah. Well,
Yeah. So I used to work.
It's K&F, bro.
I used to live in a commune, and we would have all the hippies pee and put it all into the horse manure, and we'd all like turn it for 3 to 6 months and use that for the vegetables, and it worked great. But you gotta you can't just pee on the plants. You have to do other things after that for a couple of months.
Yeah, no,
I mean, all the time too. We get that question all the time about, well, what's wrong with my plants? Well, I'm using urine and now there's nothing. We know that you can dilute it and use it, but
just don't. But just don't. Don't.
The only time I recommend it is if you're homesteading and you have horses and alpacas and which have shit nitrogen in their stuff. And you're on no medications. That's an important thing. No medications. And in the middle of nowhere and have no other access to fertilizer. Then it's fine.
Don't do it.
If you're drinking codeine cough syrup, don't pee on your plants, man.
Or birth control. They've shown.
Birth control. Oh my God, birth control. All the hormones that are in the meat, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Well, not only that, they've shown how that directly affects plants. There was a really weird white paper I was reading 3 or 4 days ago about how it affects the immune system response in plants, the fake estrogen. And I was like, what? Like, I've never heard of that.
Oh, my God. Wow, that'd be interesting.
Interesting concept, though. I haven't really heard that argument. I mean, now that you said it, I'm going, exactly. But now I got something else to tell those people at the forum when they bring that up. It's like, well, like Steve's point about the nomaders or the people that are living off the land, they wouldn't have a hormone and weird stuff in their body because they're eating organically. But your average person, well, how much have you been drinking and how much what kind of pills are you taking? And that makes a lot of sense because that's going to be your meat.
If you're just drinking booze, the alcohol will feed your acetobacters, so that's not too bad.
No, I just I could actually tell you the same garden. Oh God, this is so bad. This is so bad. This is so bad.
Come on.
All right. So this guy was tripping out. So I got hired to do living soil beds for these guys. It was going pretty well. I'm not going to name. There's more to it, but it would just not be right for me to talk about it.
Make it a vague, so no
one's Yeah, because some of them were good guys. Some of them were terrible human beings. Let's just put it to you that way.
We say allegedly. You can say it allegedly.
Allegedly.
And we're not here to piss off clients or fans or anything like that, but we like a good story.
No, they're not a client anymore. But one of the guys that was working for the team, we had the rooms flipping back and forth, right? So I think they would come on at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, turn off at 3 a.m. and the other one would turn on, and the 24 and 24 thing. And so these rooms were in like I think week 6 of flower, week 5 of flower, and I get an alert on the security camera, and I see this guy going into the room and turning on the lights in the middle of the dark cycle to prune the plants. And I went in and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Not good. That's a whole, if you don't know why that's not good, I don't have time to explain it to you. Just get the fuck out of there. And we're turning off the lights. And he's like, no, bro, it's fine. I do it all the time. Never had a problem. And I'm sitting here, I'm responsible for I was like running this facility, and I'm just like, oh fuck. So I went and I just hit the breaker on the lights and turned it off. And then this guy came out and got really upset at me, and I was like, look, dude, I'm not even saying his name. I said, look, dude, if we do this, it's gonna ruin the crop. It's probably gonna hermaphrodite the crop. We're gonna have seeds. It's gonna be really bad. And he's like, no, man, plants are just like humans. If you stay up for 3 days, you just sleep for 3 days. So however much longer that I put the light on, I'm going to turn it more dark the next day. And I just was like, where am I?
How did you get a job in this grow facility?
This was, oh man.
No, I mean him. I was saying you'd ask him.
Oh, how did he, I can't even.
Yeah, like, how in the hell did you get a job here, dude?
What I could say is that there's certain organizations where it's It's not your involvement, not necessarily based off of your skill level, but more based off of your relationships, if you know what I mean. And that's pretty much all I can really say about that.
One of the biggest, and I'll be.
This is a little while ago. I'll put it to you that way too.
One of the biggest growers I ever did consulting with. I got into a knockdown, drag-out fight with their head grower about wearing full body coverings. I'm sorry. If there's thousands of dollars in that room, shut the fuck up and put a body cover on.
Yeah.
Like, I do not understand why multiple times I've had to argue or scream at, well, politely scream at, an employee for not wearing coverings. Like, do you have the money in your bank account to replace those plants? No? Then stop arguing.
Yeah.
Argument.
Oh man. Yeah, that was, man, I have some crazy stories, and I have to be at some point I'll probably, I mean, I'm sure we all have crazy stories, but I've done a lot of stupid fucking things.
Fun ones that you don't.
I've done a lot of stupid things.
Well, that's how we learn. The guy that, so I know my original passion in life was computers, and the guy that taught me everything about programming, everything, he works for the government. He does, I'll be vague with him, but he does like programming systems for missile guidance systems and anti-missile guidance systems and missile detection systems. Anything that moves really fucking fast.
Yeah.
And, like above Mach 1. And that's, he does the programming for the detection equipment. And he told me, if you're not breaking nothing, you're not screwing anything up, you're not going to learn anything. When I worked in the aquaponics source, we had 3 separate systems that were side by side, and we would test it all the time in side by sides. We had a couple set up in the showroom, and we would test stuff, you know, to our hearts. And we do tissue samples and water samples. As long as you have the data for what happened and what went wrong, you can extrapolate a lot out of that. You know what I mean?
No,
I learn more that way.
I think what I'm more speaking about is that, like, I had a tendency earlier in my life where I liked living on the edge of things, you know. So and what I mean by that is, like, I came from a weird place. I came from a town in South Florida that was like a very weird amalgamation of different things. And so coming from Florida, I'm from Florida. That's not enough said right there. No, just nothing wrong with Florida, but you know, like the guy from Florida kind of thing. So I think I was always bored with life to some extent. So there was a little bit of the aspect of danger with the medical or traditional cannabis market that created a feeling of aliveness, right? So that's like partly why people sometimes do things that are illicit to some extent. So in that journey, I worked, and some of it was just opportunistic and trying to just survive. But I've worked for groups in LA that were like, they would have all their medical paperwork and all of that. But there was, another element behind all of it that was, on some level, I thought was like kind of interesting and exciting to understand that world. And then after I was in it, I was like, I need to get the fuck out of this as quick as possible, because like it's not like a movie at all. Like, it's a lot of really like not very happy people who are really not mentally well, or they came from a third world country, and this is just all they know. And it's very hard to reason with them, they're like a lot of irrational behavior. And I'd say that I escaped death on more than a few occasions, and I'm lucky to be here. But I learned from that. And what I learned from that was how to, that response is always better than reaction, no matter who you're dealing with. Right. So something like with that guy, that I told not to turn on the lights, he was like not a cool dude. He was like someone that I would consider a dangerous person. So I had to like be very political, knowing full well that this guy would cross a line that I never would cross, because that's not who I am. So
you know what I mean? In Jamaica, so I feel you.
Yeah, so that part of the industry is like not awesome, and it's still there to some extent. But you can still communicate with people that are in that world or that have crossed maybe that that social line to some extent. Like I think there's degrees of it, but there was a way that I had to communicate with him to where he would calm down, even though he was doing the wrong thing. And then there was also like a place where I just had to let it go and then call the people that were funding everything and let them know that I was relinquishing all responsibility, that I was ahead of everything every step of the way and being as professional as possible, but not ever getting into the line of fire.
And by the way, your plants the lights are gonna be on for 3 days, just so on your flowers.
I told him that. I said, this is what's gonna happen. X, Y, and Z. And I said, I'm letting you know, and I'm not coming back. And he called me up. The owner of this place that was actually not too bad to me, and he wasn't that bad of a guy. He just had a bunch of thugs around him. But he called me up 3 months later and told me, it was like, yeah, everything that we got. He started telling me all the problems that they were having because they let this guy kind of run the show there after I left. And it was just like, you were right about all of it. And I was like, I didn't want to be right about all of it. I wanted you guys to do well. I want everybody to do well and we walk away from it. But, I've been in grows where people just screaming at each other all the time. Like, if you're not having fun doing it, why are you doing it? If there's so many easier ways to make money, go do real estate. Get the fuck out of the garden. There's way easier ways to make money. Like, if you want to, if that's what it's all about, if you don't love this plant, then, probably doing the wrong thing. That's how I think.
So we had a question from chat. It says, what have you found to be true about using less inputs but increasing yields? Any moments or useful tips as a hobbyist?
As long as you have a healthy substrate that's microbial rich, I think most people are using too much, and their mixes and their organic mixes. I think less is more. I think that you can always add more, but you can't take it away. So if you're starting with a really balanced, healthy soil, start out with a little less, pay attention to your plant. It's easy to fix. It's much easier to fix a slight deficiency than it is to fix a slight toxicity. So, go that route. And I don't know exactly if they're asking for advice on what inputs to put into the plant, or if they're just talking about generally like less or more, and how do you figure that out? I think you have to learn your strain and start with less, and then work up, and then a healthy soil, healthy microbes. I think a balance of nutrition and microbial fertilizer is very important.
I've noticed that with the aquaponics, particularly, we have about 4% of strains just hate the aquaponics altogether. And even if I phenome hunt them, I don't really find one that really likes it. But then we've also found that how much different nutrients can be, even when you're heavily supplemented with biological sources. It can vary quite significantly from strain to strain, particularly from some of the longer term sativas tend to be a little less feeding on a given week versus some of the indicas I found were the shorter flowering tend to be much heavier feeders, I've noticed.
The other thing I can add to that as well is that people are using too much phosphorus. So, in general,
thank you.
Especially in flower.
Yeah, especially in flower, phosphorus is really important for root development. But
right.
it's also, people are just dumping phosphorus, and there's a history behind it. If you guys want me to briefly tell it, the reason why you have these flower boosts that have like 0.50-30 NPK ratio, that really got started a couple decades ago when most agricultural farmland was phosphorus deficient. So they were adding more phosphorus into these boosters to remediate what was going on with the ground soil. That's not the case with this crop or this plant. And I think just, phosphorus is a cheap mineral and they're selling it to you, but you probably only need 1/5 or 1/4 of what you're using.
Well, the other thing that doesn't help a lot is that monopotassium phosphate is so damn cheap.
That's what I'm saying. So there's a high markup.
Strictly because it's so damn cheap. It is half the reason why a lot of your bloom boosters have so much phosphorus. You really don't need phosphorus much past the second week of flower. Maybe if it's a long sativa, maybe fourth week of flower max. And that's saying that that's like a 10 or 12 or 14 week or more sativa. Like you only need in the beginning. Once that flips over, the plant just needs potassium and nitrogen more than anything else.
Well, we found you really do it at the transition, like you said. And sometimes that's why you had that bud, the Evil Empire AN. You know, they had that bud blood, and you only gave it one time, and that was that big high dose of potassium. When I got into hydroponic business, because I didn't bring this up earlier, but to you, but it was, I have a hydroponic greenhouse. So early on in my doing that, one of the old guys came over and goes, yeah, we'll take and shoot 2,500 parts per million in at one time. You know, like when it gets 4 or 5 fruit sets on your tomatoes. So then they shoot it, they call it injecting it, and they eject it into the pot or the bag. We use poly bags of perlite and inject it in there one time and then let it wash through. And that's it. And then you keep doing your balance. And like Steve said, you raise your nitrogen and your calcium, and as you get more and more fruit sets, or that's different than cannabis. But I'm actually talking about tomatoes now. But
when they run super high phosphorus, is that high phosphorus actually will act as a pH buffer similar to carbonates. And people forget that. Like, if you really start running your phosphorus way too high, you're going to have weird pH problems where your pH simply will not go below a certain level. And you can also do the same thing by over aerating your water. I've seen that multiple times as well as a consultant, where people were injecting too much oxygen into the, or not too much oxygen, but the amount of CO2 in the air and getting into the water was keeping a minimum level of pH as well, aside from, depending on, I've seen both phosphorus and that as well. So that's something, both over aeration and over phosphorus stuff can fuck shit up.
When you're saying, will that increase the pH?
Yes. So
it changes where the buffer is, right?
Yep, especially when you're double stacking airlifts with aeration in your system as well. You see a lot of these guys, especially the eco-conscious guys, trying to switch over to airlifts, and airlifts actually end up being a problem because of the amount of aeration they put in the water, and it can screw up your pH. Not to mention the added effect, even if that I account for that, the additional oxygen in the water from all the airlift actually causes me to burn through my iron a lot faster because it oxidizes much quicker. Same thing with zinc as well. Those two in particular will oxidize at a significantly faster rate using airlifts compared to other systems.
So where do you want your oxygen levels to be?
For DO?
Yeah.
I've been keeping mine at least minimum of 6, but I try to keep it 7 or 8 and try to keep it a little bit higher.
Wow, I've seen people trying to run it higher.
Yeah, so when you run it higher, that's cool, but your actual benefit in the plants is pretty. I have yet to see side-by-sides with tissue samples that prove to me, or even any kind of documented growth rate that improves. Like we've did a whole bunch of side-by-sides with at the aquaponics source with basil, lettuce, tomatoes, and 3 other crops. I forget what the other 3 were off the top of my head, but we tested them in side-by-sides, and we found significantly, like that's kind of where it tops out as far as tissue increase. Now in cannabis, I can't make that same correlation because you have resin production and everything else, but I can tell you based on other crops that I don't really see a reason. Now personally, if I had the option to put an air stone in every pot that I was running or something, yeah, I'd do it, but I'd also keep a very close eye on what the actual pH was with a probe, and at least a couple of those pots occasionally to make sure that wasn't getting too high, because that is a problem. And I've seen that on commercial grows, both in cannabis and in vegetables, where they had literally too much aeration or were injecting too much air into the system, and it was causing a problem. Now, this is an aquaponic systems, not so much directly hydro, but in aquaponic systems, I have actually seen a couple of people over-engineer and had too much aeration.
What about aeroponics? How does that
Well, the aeroponics you have exposed to the air. One of the other downsides. Oh no, I'm sorry. I was about to say that they banned it for organics, but I forgot they overturned it. So one of the with aeroponics, it works completely differently because you're not dealing with a fully aquatic environment. So you're actually dealing with about much more terrestrial microbes and more aquatic microbes because of the environment and the gas exchange. So
that's cool.
You also have problems with aeroponics. In aeroponics, as long as you have adequate fresh air through the system, you don't really have too many issues with pythium. Whereas if you have them in a closed system like nutrient film, where you have the high humidity and a lack of oxygen, that's when you tend to get the more pythium and root rot outbreaks as well. When you have a proper, like in aquaponics,
well, most people aren't running
pythium,
true aeroponics. Most people are running easy cloners and calling that aeroponics. They're not running like high pressured, high mist, That's a whole different.
So in aquaponics, pythium is super rare because we generally have trichoderma, we have lactobacilli, we have bacillus stabilis. All three of those microbes and a whole bunch of others love to feed on pythium. They love to eat it. It's a favorite food of theirs. So by having and by actively culturing all those little microbes because of the fish waste and the other pieces of the puzzle, you actually have this better microbial defense in the root system. So it's ultra rare. The only time I've ever seen root rot in aquaponic systems is people running wicking beds that were staying too wet, that did not have properly oxygenated soil. And even when I ran some aquaponic cannabis runs in smart pots with super aerated soil, we weren't able to keep them quite dry enough in the bottom part. Right when they went to late flower, once they start killing off a portion of the root system, we were almost always getting some kind of root issue. And I'm not saying that it's not possible to achieve, but it's very complicated and it's a pain in the ass, and there's easier ways to do it. But definitely can be an issue, and depending on what you're doing and the root system and how you set the root system up can vary dramatically. And I wanted to speak a little bit on what you were saying earlier about how important it is to not just grow cannabis, but to grow some other crops. I know I've learned a shit ton by growing medicinal herbs, both kitchen herbs and some of the other funkier medicinal herbs, because they have weird nutrient requirements. And figuring how to make that plant happy, or how to supplement those nutrients in the aquaponic system without hurting the fish, or how to solve some of these other wonky problems that you run into with some of these particular herbs really helped me come back to the cannabis and solve some problems very quickly that normally I wouldn't have an answer for, or I had an answer that maybe was less traditional but worked faster, or whatever. And I really think that's something that people should spend more time on. If you are a cannabis grower, grow some other stuff. Like, definitely try to diversify what you're doing and grow some harder plants. Grow some funkier herbs that have weird nutrient requirements or fungal requirements in the root system or whatever. OSHA root. Grow some fruit trees, grow some funky stuff and some fruit berries or whatever, to mix up and change up, something, berries in particular, because they're more acidic soil, but try to do some stuff that's maybe different, more challenging, and you actually teach yourself a lot more about how the plants work and how to, look at your cannabis plants in general. And I just wanted to speak more on what you were saying earlier.
Awesome. Love it. Still, guys, I got to wrap it up.
Sure. I appreciate your time.
You got it.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks a lot. I love the
So
conversation.
how do people find you, and what kind of things can you offer people out there that are maybe in need of services?
So you can find me you can go to poetryplants.com, and there's a form submission there if you're interested in any of the consulting services. And the consulting services kind of go scope wise from the license phase. I do a lot of document writing too for applications, SOP writing. So a lot of the front end stuff, I typically do the design work with an MEP team. So that's an engineering team and an architect. So I can help make sure that everything makes sense for the client or the grower and the MEP team. So a lot of that is like moving boxes around and figuring out, all these things we talked about with the different types of canopy deployments. And then I write a plant program for that. And then I train people on how to use the facility and get the facility operational, and then usually work with them until they're comfortable on their own. And that's the scope of the consulting services. There's other things I'm working on as well, but that's my primary business at the moment.
Awesome. That's great. If you're interested as well, you can also check out the description. There's a link to his website and his Instagram as well. And thanks a lot for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Take care, guys.
Yep. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. How are you doing there, Josh? That's his coffee.
Yeah, dab it out. Oh, excuse me. Pass on me. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Why don't you get talk to
how you doing, BrayneGro? You haven't seen you in a minute. Okay. We can't hear you.
To learn how to grow different damage.
Yeah, whatever you can do to increase your, either reduce the bandwidth usage on your end or find a better signal spot. All right, we'll try Mr. Green Jeans. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, not much is going on. I moved up. We moved up one of my old citrus trees, one of my 30-year-old container trees, stuck it on the back of the wife's father's Forerunner. You know, just basically lashed it to the back, and it's sticking up about 2 or 3 feet above that. I didn't even put a tarp on it. Just drove it 60 miles an hour. It's about it's about 60 miles from. You know, I figured that
were you close to the fire at all? There's that 2 fires now just outside LA.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. We don't smell anything. We're on the slope here in San Pedro. So far, it's been good. But yeah, it was cool moving the tree.
Hearts out to everyone who's suffering tonight in California. There's quite a few, 3 or 4 big fires going on right now, and in some of them in cannabis country, and I know some people very close to one of them. So shout out to you guys. Also, quick shout out, fuck Jeff Sessions. I hope you burn him up. And I'm glad he got fired by the douchebag in chief. Just had to throw that in there because that guy's a fucking douchebag.
I knew you were going to bring that up tonight.
Yeah,
he's out.
So it'd be real interesting to see who the new Attorney General is. It could have dramatic effects for the cannabis industry, depending on who it is that he decides.
Yeah.
So what else is new with you? Anything? How's your plant coming?
Yeah, everything's great. Boy, it's it's winter time. Everything outdoors really grows a lot better. Got seeds started of things like that, like the Mucuna beans. Those are growing pretty well, even though it's kind of supposed to be winter. And I got seeds of what's that stuff? Tetragonalobus purpurea, the 3-sided or the triangle bean, winged bean with the wings on it.
Wing beans, yes.
Yeah, Tetragonalobus or something like that. I forget. I have to look it up again.
Yeah, those seeds are cool because it looks like they're made of wood.
Yeah, the Filipinos, they make a dish called palang. I'm not sure. I hope I get it right. No offense to the Filipinos out there.
Are those the ones that I gave you? Or?
No, there weren't. No, I got these from Australia, from a really cool seed company there called Fair Dinkum Seeds. How cool is that name? Fair Dinkum Seeds.
Put our link in chat, well, either in the speaker chat or the other one. I'll put that in the description. Or email that subscription for everybody.
Yeah. I also got from them seeds of hibiscus sabdarifa, which is roselle, which is the one that you can make the drink out of. Jamaica, I think it is what the Mexicans call it, and I'm not sure different people, make tea out of it, or you can make red dye out of it. It's the calyx of the flower part of the so I got seeds of that started, and also they sent me a freebie pack of hibiscus cannabinus or cannabinus, I think it is, and that's the type that's a fiber kind of hibiscus. I guess it's a fiber plant. So yeah, that's what we got growing out in the garden. Of course, all things like Swiss chard and stuff like that are doing great. We're still getting, gigantic, like eggplants are doing really well. Peppers are still doing well. Southern California, the garden just keeps on doing its thing, I still can't believe we took that citrus tree back all the way 60 miles on the back of the 4Runner.
Should have given it a good shot of magnesium.
The poor thing. I was thinking, well, 60 miles an hour is not that bad. It can probably stand that much wind, and it was pretty humid. It wasn't super dry at the time, and it was nighttime. It wasn't day at all, and I kept it down to 60 miles an hour. Only a little bit of it was sticking out of the top. It's fine. It really only lost a few leaves. It seems fine. Citrus trees are tough, man. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's a lime quat. It's a really interesting a cross between a lime and a kumquat, which is a weird, yeah. So it has the outside skin is kind of sweet, and it makes a bigger than a kumquat, and yellow fruit. You can eat the skin. Anyway, yeah, I'm done.
So
Moving the citrus tree.
I wanted to also let everybody know I created a Growing with Fishes podcast Discord channel.
Oh, Discord, yeah.
It's discord.gg/NQ capital B lowercase f 3B as in boy, J as in Jim. And then if anyone's interested, pop on there. Kind of give everybody a place to hang out, talk over voice, have some text chats, and kind of give our community a place to go and shoot the shit, whether they'll listen to the show or if they have a question in between episodes. They just want to talk to some other fans, or give people a chance to talk to us, a little more less formal. Marty and I are both on there quite often, so definitely check that out, and the link is in the description. And somebody gave me the idea of that the other day, and I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I use that a little bit. Long-term player of World of Warcraft, and use that for that. So that'll be fun to set one up for all of us. So if anybody's interested, we have one set up. Link is in the description of the channel, and also up on Instagram if you're listening to this in the audio format. And definitely check that out. Just give people more access and give people a chance to kind of cross-pollinate a little bit more.
Cool. Yeah, I joined, but I have no idea how it works. Guess I'll figure it out.
Well, your seeds are going pretty well.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. How are they doing?
Going well. I made the mistake of starting some of them in cocoa plugs. So I got two out of that, but that was because of the fault of the plug. So I started 6 new ones, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to show everybody why you should not use cocoa plugs and why
How do you
much better.
How do you have such big balls to just be starting seeds like when you're on the fly like you are?
Because I can leave my plants to my housemates to grow. You can see the grow lights behind me. I'll leave it at that.
And on that note, I see BrayneGro come back. He had to reboot. I wonder, are you alive over there, Brain?
See how yours.
Am I coming through clear or no?
Much better. What's up with you, buddy? It's been a minute.
Oh yeah. I just mostly been on the mycology tip. I finally got back around to starting a few seeds, and I'll have some plants growing. I planted 5 of Mr. Green Gene Oreo crossed BB2, and out of those, all 5 germinated, but only 3 of them really sprouted. 2 of them kind of didn't really come up past the soil surface. But I also started a couple of super silver haze, and one of them is doing really well, which is the one I'll probably keep around. And mostly, like I said, on the mycology thing, man, just been learning to grow different things in different substrates, mostly trying to master the things that can grow on wood right now. So, I don't know, other than that, I'm actually really happy to have started some more plants again.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Also, I've got a breeding project that I started. A buddy of mine had a few plants, and they're from seedsman.com. The genetics. It's a strain that's called Honduras, and it's supposed to be 100% sativa. And I'm finally going to be able to breed something, because he actually started a job where he's working a shit ton of hours and just doesn't have time to look after them. So I went ahead and threw them both in dual root zone pots, and already got those started away. One of them is the female is already like on day 2 of flowering, and the male I'm going to throw in there after 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll get some seeds from those, which will be pretty cool. Have 100% sativa strains of seed growing.
Sweet.
Awesome, dude. Weren't you doing some gold leaf too?
Yeah, I already harvested and smoked that, man. The purple haze too.
How'd that turn out for you?
That gold leaf was really, really tasty. The purple haze didn't really seem to have too much of a strong terpene profile. It kind of had like a real spicy taste with like a little bit of fruitiness to it. Like it was like really, really deep fruity undertones, and I guess like a grape or blueberry kind of undertones to it. But that gold leaf, man, that tasted amazing. That stuff was great.
Cool. What were you tasting on that gold leaf?
Oh man, to be honest, I don't really remember. I guess it was mostly just like a citrusy kind of terpene profile. I don't know. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
I got different taste out of it when I did. It was kind of weird. It's like it just depends. I think like different parts of the plant tasted different.
Right.
But I haven't done a lot of it. I think I just did like a couple of plants one time, and then I've been experimenting. So I really never got to play with it beyond growing it once. So I'm looking forward to doing more.
I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome, and yeah, you guys, we've been talking about that. Might be a special care package coming, and that's one of the things that's in it.
The gold leaf, heck yeah.
Yeah, that's Robert's personal strain, high CBD, high THC strain I was telling you all about. So
awesome.
That's why I was giving Steve shit, because popping those seeds. Like I'm dying to pop those beans too, but I'm just got to restrain myself to when I've got everything lined up proper.
Yeah.
I wanted to also let everyone know Marty and I will be teaching an online aquaponic cannabis class December 8th and 9th. You guys can check out that through Ponics website on their classes and consulting. It'll take you right to that, and or you can check out the link in the description below. And yeah, definitely check that out if you're looking to learn more. It'll be a 2-day intensive class with Marty and myself, and Marty will have footage live from his grow. We'll go over a whole bunch of different techniques, and I'll go over a bunch of the science, and it'll be great. So definitely check that out if you're looking to learn more. What's new with you, Josh? You've been working hard.
I've been harvesting. I'm still just hard at the harvest game. My greenhouse is down, so that's pretty awesome. And yeah. What else is new? Just kind of getting my mothers are all real small, and kind of bringing them up and getting them ready to fill out the greenhouse in January. I know that sounds like it's a little ways away, but I'm planning to be a nursery, so I got a lot of mothers. There's a couple hundred of them. So I'll take them and I'll clone them, and I'll fill my greenhouse up with about 1,200 plants, and those will all be mothers that I'll then just clone the shit out of. Maybe we were talking about that earlier, and I have some thoughts on how long you should keep some mothers, and I think that it's a lot of people really the determining factor is the health of the plant. That you're taking the cut off and where you're taking it, and that it's a healthy portion of that plant that's cut. So if depending on your situation, I would guess, Steve, you've had some experience in aquaponics, keeping plants at extreme health, right in the apex of the bell curve for a long period of time. I've had mothers that I feel confident taking cuts off them for over a year.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen plants that were 2 years old that were still giving perfectly good cuts. I think that there is certain genes and certain strains that will cause the plant to degrade faster. I also think that the level of stress you put on the mothers is a heavy determining factor in
Right.
the level of perm. So if those plants were always kept in pretty chill conditions and never exposed to a ton of stress, a little bit of stress is fine, but never went through any kind of super weird conditions, you're good. But the moment you start screwing it up or putting it through a longer night cycle and flipping it back, like I would not ever use something that was flowered out and flipped back over for clones, like ever, because you've already
No.
pushed the hormones around in that plant and you can't predict it anymore. And we talked about why that plant does it. And we'll just reiterate again, the reason why cannabis will self-pollinate or hermaphrodite, which reduces potency, which is what we don't want, is because it's a self-preservation mechanism. The plant wants to self-pollinate so it doesn't go through regional extinction wherever that plant was growing. And that's why it evolved to do that. So that's the reason why it does that in the first place. And people often forget that when they stress their plants out a lot, trying to get higher resin production or XYZ, put a knife through the stem, or we've talked about or schwazing or some of these other stuff. That's not a plant you can use again for mother because you've already screwed up the stress hormones in them. Not to say that it can't produce well or it couldn't be used for a mother for a little bit, but you're going to have an increased percentage chance of those plants herming or throwing nanners or just having issues.
Yeah, I guess my point that I was trying to make is that it's all about the health of the current health of the plant and the current status of the plant. Like the genetics are in there, and I think people don't. Well, I don't even know why I say it like that, but like I guess my point is to learn to learn what a really healthy plant looks like, and it should never look woody. Maybe down at if you're growing a 10-footer down at the bottom, but it should be very plush and supple and like leathery. Like you should be looking at the leaves and thinking, "Holy fuck, I would love to like make some shoes out of this shit." It's like beautiful leather and glossy, and like when you feel it, it feels leathery. Like if you're experiencing brittle on your leaves, you should not be taking cuts off that shit.
The one thing I wanted to say, like, if you have super fungally dominant soil, you will have a woodier structured plant overall.
I'll argue with you on
In my
that one, man.
Well,
No, wait.
Okay, so let me tell you why that comes from. The more soil I use in a dual root zone, so if I do a 70% soil versus a 40% soil in a dual root zone, I will get a woodier plant with the higher percentage soil with the higher.
Yeah, I think it's because you're getting, and I've told you I've grown aquaponics. I think you're getting anaerobic zones in there. I don't think that it's because of the fungal dominance.
So I replicated that. I've replicated that not with just cannabis, but with fruit trees.
It'd still be the same thing. It's the amount of soil that you're getting some anaerobic zones in there. It's getting too wet somewhere in there.
No, I mean
that's what I would argue.
Very tight controls. No, that's entirely possible, but I would say at least in two of them that there was.
So here's the test I did this summer. After rapping with Elaine and Layton about cannabis being successionally an under canopy plant, and talking with Eric from Eric Branstad that does he's a greenhouse grower special. I forget what his new company is called, Light Depth Greenhouse, I think, on Instagram. Anyways, talking about light diffusion and fungal dominance in the soil and where cannabis is successionally, meaning, you know, if we fucking clear cutted the forest and walked away, and what would happen? We'd start with some weeds would grow up, and then we'd get some bushes, and then some small trees, and then some bigger trees, and then some really fucking big trees, and this is succession, right? How this stuff reforests. And cannabis is in there as an understory, meaning there's fucking trees over that shit, just like blackberries, and it's getting a diffused light. So I took that concept and I put my 15 medical marijuana plants inside the back of my forest. And the plants were really fucked up. They were root bound. They were woody for sure. They had that wood, red, stemmy, you know, like some splotchy leaves. And I put them in the soil, in the native soil, dug holes in the native soil, right, you know, amongst these big trees, and I covered up with straw, and I put some guano down, and then I put drippers on them, and I turned that dripper on once a week, and that's it. And they took off, and they're like, they're still out there growing there right now, man. They're growing gangbusters. Like they're the mycorrhizae in that soil, and the fungal dominance in that soil is 100% what is, and the light diffusion, all those together. Like I'm pretty convinced. Like the cannabis does not want super powerful light, and that's like
Right.
Everyone wants to argue with me as soon as I say that, right?
No. Well, the light thing is debatable, but my whole point is that the more fungal dominant the soil is, the more woody the plant is. If it
11 to 1. We're saying now, Elaine and Scott are saying 11 to 1.
Sure. What I'm saying is that your lignin production directly goes up with the increased fungal dominance of the soil, and that's what dual root zone allows to happen in an aquaponic environment. Is my whole point.
I don't know what that means.
So in a dual root zone, you have the soil layer. In a fully aquatic layer, there is fungi that can survive fully aquatically, but not many. It's extremely limited. We're still learning about those, but it's much more limited. With the soil zone, you have you can have all your normal fungi. The more fungi you have, and the more fungal dominant the root zone is, the more woody the plant is. So, for example, with aquaponics, generally, the woodier the crop, the more the deeper or the more percentage in your dual root zone pot your soil layer should be. So, if I'm doing fruit trees, I might do as high as 70% soil to 30% flood and drain layer in that root system, versus something like cannabis where I want 50-50 to get a increased bacterial exposure because it's a faster growing crop.
So with a tomato, would you back down to like a 70-30, 70% aquaponic roots, 30% soil?
So I still stick to 50-50 with tomatoes. I used to do 40% or even 30% soil. What I found was that there's very little difference between 30% and 40% in terms of, or 30%, 50% soil percentage in terms of yield. But when it comes to fungal resistance, the plants get a much bigger fungal resistance at 50% than they do at 30%. And since my yield's the same, I might as well.
I wonder. I don't know, man. I'm just.
This was all just in my lab testing. I'm totally willing to be proven wrong on some of this.
Yeah, no.
This is with my testing.
I'm not a scientist, and I'm learning this shit. But I wonder if, like, I'm just totally shooting in the dark, and it would be interesting. Maybe you've already looked at this under a microscope, and you can answer this. But like, are the wrong kind of fungi coming across from the aquatic system? You're getting root.
So this was all uninoculated intentionally, strictly for the purpose of having a control stuff. So
yeah, but it's in the air. It's in the air.
Sure. What I'm saying is that since then, I've gotten much more into probiotics and putting beneficial microbes into my soil and watering it into all my stuff. So now, with my current set of SOPs and stuff, none of that is even a factor in what I'm doing. But it's something that I think needs a lot more study And that's why I like to talk to the people. Like we've had Joe Pate on from Kentucky State, who was actually doing side by sides with some of the KNF methods, like lactobacillus in aquaponics and things like that as well.
Well, see, it kind of trips me up, dude, because like, yeah, I lost my fucking lighter. I'm tripping on it, but like, so the way I look at KNF is it is super fungally dominant. You're harvesting saprophytic fungi out of the forest specifically, and you're building the soil food web off the very base elements. You're going from saprophytic fungi to you're increasing them, and then I can't walk you exactly through the steps, but by the time you start adding manure, you're adding the protozoa and the ciliates are starting to develop, and you're starting to get into the full spectrum of the soil food web, right? But if you're just talking about bacillus, right? Bacillus is bacillus, and like I feel like a lot of people when they talk about KNF, they focus. And I know you get all this. I just want to like air it out. That they just think of the lactobacillus serum because it's like the most popular one, and I don't even know why. When really IMO should be the most popular. It's the backbone of the whole thing, and it's fungi is the backbone. Fungi and everything is built off that fucking shit. Like.
That's
been 2018 for me is the year of fungi.
The difference in the conversation that we're having is you're talking about the soil layer and I'm talking about the aquatic layer.
Okay.
I agree with everything you're saying for the soil layer, 1000%. I'm strictly talking about the aquatic layer, I guess, in this rant. I'll put it that way. That's a disconnect. But yeah, I think that's definitely something that it can be improved upon. I think that's really where the future of aquaponics and even most of these commercial scale production is that what are the ideal microbial chains and what is the ideal microbial chain for nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and magnesium in an organic setting that works well with an aquatic environment. Eventually they'll figure that out for soil as well, but in aquatics, like soil has had a lot of research over the past 80 to 100 years. Aquatics has not. We've been focused on what works well for aquaculture, very little on aquatic, organic, hydroponic, organic, aquaponic production. So it's kind of a newer field, and that's why it's really great to use some of the products, something like Mammoth P, or some of the other phosphorus chelating microbes, and now they're starting to see some other nutrients. There's some phosphorus ones out now. Potassium ones out now, and a couple of others. There's a silica one out now that can really increase that on a microbial level, not using additional mineral salts. And that's really what we kind of want to look to hybridize with our aquaponic systems, or even organic hydroponic systems, or to a lesser extent even soil systems. That's what we all want to aim at, and stop using so much salts.
Stop using so much of everything, dude. Like, I'm learning less. We're all learning lessons. And my last grow, I had a bunch of shit going on. I'll start ranting about it now. I talked to you guys about it before. I had bug issues. I ripped down the 2/3 of my greenhouse on either side, and I heat treated the center row. The other thing I probably haven't talked about is I haven't applied anything. I've just had my blue mats. I haven't sprayed anything, just fucking blue mat, fresh water. I have a guy came over to help trim today, and he's an experienced grower, and he, kind of more on the chemical side of things. He asked about my pH, and I'm like, no pH. Like, dude, I didn't do anything to this weed, like nothing. Like, it's just water. I planted the plants, I put the trellis up, I watered it, and I went and did other stuff, literally, and now I harvested it. And it is quite honestly some of the best weed I've grown in my life. There's, some of the stuff that came out of here. It's a great crop, but I'm super impressed with myself. And my point is, I shouldn't be impressed with myself. I guess it's my work ethic, but the microbes in the soil base that is built up in these beds is so fucking kick ass. And I actually attribute it to Leighton's product because I've applied on a weekly or bi-weekly basis up until this grow his compost tea, which is a full, that's why he calls it Kingdom Aquaponics. It's the full fucking deal. It's like if you take IMO all the way to IMO 5, you got the full spectrum. And that's like the goal, right? Is the goal is to not be doing that shit and to be just adding very minimal shit. And so much of the cannabis world is like, I just keep talking to people. They're like, oh yeah, I add mycos every fucking this, and I add this every this, and even when we switch over to organics, and myself included, I still have these regimens that I want to be in, because I'm scared, and like, I don't know, the more I'm able to develop the biology in my system and really get that thing charged, I'm realizing I don't have to do shit except for water it and like, make sure everything's growing, and don't ever not let anything grow. There's always got to be something growing. And drain.
Yeah. So what you were trying to say earlier is you're extremely humbled and so happy to have come out of the show.
Yeah, right. But I'm saying exactly. It's totally right. It's a little bit of both worlds. I'm like, it's the gardener, right?
Well, it's always
it's like
nice.
This whole thing is like you feel like a badass, then you get humbled, and then you're like, it's up and down and left and right.
It's nice to have it work out, or when you try something new, or do it like that. It's pretty interesting because I know your grow is a lot different than any of us do. The way you went about doing that, building those beds and all. And it's funny because, like he said earlier, I remember I was thinking you weren't on the show at the time, but we were talking about rickets. And I kept trying to get the word in edgewise going, yeah, Josh, one of our regular guys, he lost a whole, because he was saying, our guest tonight was saying, you just might as well tear the whole house down. He said, I'd rather lose, like, because you got different size growths with different houses. I mean, you got the one house, but with where he's talking about several houses, you rather tear that whole house down and lose that 20% or 25% right now this year than 25% for the next 3 years, and you're combating that shit all the time.
Right, exactly, and that's kind of how I was with that. I burnt everything, every fucking thing, and I don't do that. Right, I didn't listen to the conversation, but it's the same concept, I had to fucking, and I burnt all my stocks this time, just, I don't want to be dealing with this next year. And so I'm going to have to be extra strong in the spring on my beneficial insects, super strong on my scouting. And, but, I'm bringing aquaponics in, just give me a second, Roger. I'm going to build a third of that greenhouse is going to be an aquaponic bed.
So you're thinking about how I'm going about it too. I'm thinking about making a portion, do what I do, so I know I'll be successful at least while I'm learning, And as I'm killing fish, as Stephen Marty always promised you will kill lots of fish, when you first go. And now I'm fortunate. I got some cool guys out west, that are going to be sending me some cultured, some water that's all ready to cycled water and stuff like that.
I have 12-year-old water. So I've actually been doing this shit for 12 years, and I've got the same water and the same rocks that I've been moving around, and they're still going right now. I got catfish in it. I just haven't done it at scale, and that's the whole thing. Is the scale I couldn't afford, and now I've been talking with Steve, and like, I'm just gonna. I'm doing it for a heat base, and like like I told you guys, I'm switching over to nursery, and so I can afford to do that in the setup, and it's actually gonna be really beneficial. And I think that I don't know. Honestly, maybe this Steve might it'd be a good discussion. But I think that the future of aquaponics and cannabis is going to be like a combination. Where people use it for certain tools. Like it's a really good mothering thing, and because like I honestly think that I can't afford the labor to repot, to do a dual root zone when it comes to cropping and flowers. But in terms of mothers, I can afford the time to do that, and having that both root zone layers where I have that hydroponic layer and the soil layer, I'm really into that for my mothers. But I don't know, maybe Steve, you have something to say about that. Maybe you have a better.
Oh yeah, so I worked with a couple of people with doing mothers for aquaponics, and you'll definitely not get better production than as far as clone and mother production with aquaponics, and even our guest today, Nelson, was saying he was sick. We've had breeder Steve come on and say that was the best growth he's ever seen. So we've had don't listen to just me, listen to our guests.
Oh, yeah, that was great too tonight with Nelson. I just thought I just wanted to share that with Josh because I know I'm sitting there going, it's every time Josh misses part of his show, we talk about what Josh is doing during the show somehow. The guest brings up stuff that Josh would be like jumping in and talking to him about, and it's where's Josh?
Oh yeah, I know. I wanted to get on, dude. It's been a
Oh, you're
crazy day.
working.
I really wanted to get on. I've been itching, so sorry. I wanted to.
Just funny. It's twice now that you've missed with like a guest where you'd be going like, I'd going, Josh would be eating this up right now.
I know, yeah. With
Yeah.
the
Gotta
air,
gotta listen to the show, the beginning of the show tonight, dude.
yeah.
Do
Sorry,
you
you just cut me off and just say, "Hey, dude, shut the fuck up." We talked about that.
do you want to plug your conference?
Sure, it's the regenerativeorganiccannabis.com. We're doing 4 conferences, one in Vancouver, Washington, or Vancouver, BC, Portland, Maine, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Redway, California. It's we came up with a slogan this week. Let's see if I can remember it. Leighton and I. It's what the fuck is it? Teaching regenerative loops with love and science. Teaching regenerative loops with love and science. And the school we've been talking about starting is we're kind of affectionately nicknaming the School of Rock, the School of Regenerative Organic Cannabis. So, yeah, that's what's
Cool.
going on with the conference. But go to the website for all the details. We have some fucking kick-ass speakers, and it's not like traditional conferences. We've talked about it a lot on the show before. It's really education-based. There's no vendors. There's no sales. Some of the people that speak do have companies that sell stuff, but they are not there to sell that stuff whatsoever. And they're really cool about it. They kind of like don't even really mention their products often, honestly. So they're there to teach, and your tuition pays them to be there, and they're there to interact with you, not only just when they're teaching, when they're speaking, but like personally. So I think that's kind of the big deal that we're going for, is in terms of how to like really connect with folks. And
And after you rescheduled, because this conference, you wanted to have a big conference out west, you had to postpone. As you did that, you changed the, like you said, the tuition or to come in. You want to talk about because the price that you changed it to, for what you're getting. Maybe you should talk about that because people are so scared. Yeah. You drop the price to where it's almost, it's not free, but it's not. It's worth paying.
So that's a really good point. We actually one really cool company we connected with this week is GrowGreen, mi.com, growgreenmichigan.com. They're a large hydroponic store retailer, and they have a huge storefront in Ann Arbor area. And so that's where we're going to do our conference. And they're quite a large business, and they totally support organic. They support the whole spectrum of cannabis growing. It's really, they have a guy that's specific just for organic portion, and they're clearing up. They have a whole section in their store. It's like a 20,000 square foot warehouse. It's like 10,000 square feet there. That's their organic area, and they're like pushing all the stuff away. Let us do our thing there. So my point in saying that is, if you buy a ticket before December 1st, they're reduced. Like the 3-day ticket is reduced to $250 from $300. The 1 day is reduced from $125 to $95. But if you buy something from growgreenmi.com, you will get a little coupon code for 10% off, and that will apply to that same discount before December 1st. So if you like fucking get on it, buy something from them right now, and apply that, you could get a really good deal. So that would really help us, because the whole deal is, with most conferences, you get attendance, everyone comes at the door, 75%, and it's really hard for us because we're not a huge company. We're just me and Leighton, and we don't got money, and so we can't just rent a place that seats 1,000 people and then have 200 people show up. It would be a bust for us. So In Redway, for instance, last year we filled the place and was standing room only, you know, and so the more people we can get to sign up sooner, the better. It just works out. So that's why we're trying to drive that.
Now, is that deadline? Because you've got shows in the spring and you've got shows in the West Coast and the Northwest here in the like winter.
It's the deadline for the whole thing.
Okay, so the deadline stands no matter what show you're going to.
Yep, and then but that Grow Green, if you buy anything from growgreensmi.com from now till right the day before the show, it'll be a 10% off for any of the shows. You know, any of the places.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that coupon code is good. And then December 1st, we're going to cut that off, and we'll probably, you know, we'll do a little bit of other promotional stuff through different people, you know, but yeah, we, you know, like the money is tight. We're not making money on this thing, and we have to pay these people, and that's real. And so, me and Layton will be at the Emerald Cup though this year, and we're there to same thing. We'll have a discount code and meet people and talk about what we're doing. So we may even get a booth. We'll see.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I think if anybody from the show can make it out there, like if Layton and I do get a booth, it's like free. Everyone should come hang out and say what's up. If we don't, we'll be hanging around with Josh and Kelly at the Dragonfly Earth Medicine tent, mostly, you know. So we'll see. But if we do get a booth, I'm sure we'll be right beside them in that kind of area. But yeah, I'd love to see any, you know, Mr. Green Jeans. You should come up, dude. Are you listening?
Yeah, I'm listening. I just turned off. Yeah, I'm hoping to make it. Planning to. It'd be good.
I'm going to try and make the cup as well. But, no promises yet, but I'm trying. I got a pretty tight, like a week out, so I'm going to see if I can catch a flight out at the end of that.
And see, I'm trying to catch Michigan because it's at least on this side of the country, but I really want to go. Some of it has to do with what exact guests are going to be, even though almost all of them you said are going to be at each show. Just about, but
yeah, all the guests
in Maine.
I would say half the guests of the show will be there.
All the guests will be at every show except for Josh and Kelly are going to miss Redway, California, and Portland, Maine. They'll be traveling abroad at that point. So that's the only thing. Otherwise, it's the whole. We built the band, and the band's going on tour, but you know, part of the band won't make it for 2 shows.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I was speaking about Emerald Cup. He was speaking about his conference.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to clarify why we said 2 different things. You're fine. Yeah, so do you want to go quick over the guest list or the speaker list?
Yeah. So Layton Morrison, obviously he's my partner in crime with this whole thing, Kingdom Aquaponics. Dr. Elaine Ingham, sorry, my head went blank. She Soil Food Web, if you know that term, that's her. She's awesome. We got none other than Steve Reisner. He's going to talk on aquaponics and sustainable design. And honestly, that's the part that that like Steve crushes it at this conference, because everyone just wants to talk soil, and he comes in and is like, boom, there's this, and there's sustainable design too, and you fuckers aren't even talking about that, and it's badass. And we talked about it on the show before, but yeah. We got Chip Osborne to talk soil chemistry and soil substrate and soil testing, and Josh and Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine. Craig.
Hopefully they'll be on the show soon.
Yeah, we'd like to get them on the show soon. They're awesome. I mean, they're beyond experience. They've been doing this, growing cannabis up north of me, like, I don't know, it's a couple hours north of me at least, in Canada for 25 years. And yeah, it's cool what they do. So
they're awesome. I like one ball of energy, and the 2 of them just,
the way they talk together and kind of sometimes finish each other's sentences, it's like, I wonder. You almost wonder if they just like rehearse the shit, but they don't.
Well, and you also have Chris Trump coming.
Yeah, I was gonna say Chris Trump is coming to talk Korean natural farming, and I wouldn't have any other person, honestly. Chris doesn't grow cannabis, but he knows plants, and he's very smart, and he's done all the back work, and he's the master of Korean natural farming. Kind of represent stateside for sure. And so he's a very cool guy and very humble, and I love that I get to learn under Chris Trump so much, big time.
Yeah, he's definitely cool, Jim. With him and Dr. Faust.
Yeah, and Dr. Faust, it will be next. He talks biostimulants. He started BioAg and is the owner operator of BioAg. Humic acid and fulvic acid is his specialty. He's also doing a lot of exciting stuff, and he's done so much in his life and done so much research, and he's one hell of a character. And man, if you can corner that guy at all, I highly suggest you do. And he'll just talk to you. Just ask him a good question and shut up. Don't ask him a bad question because he won't give you much. But ask him a good question.
Oh yeah, he'll tell you if you're stupid if you ask a stupid question.
And that's something that Josh was trying to get to a while ago. This isn't just going to be go to class and then leave and catch them in the foyer. No, all the people at this show are going to be available to you in the evenings after the shows. And stuff
during in between, like the speakers after they speak, they're out. People are usually smoking weed and hanging out.
They're going to hang out.
The speakers out there. Not everybody smokes weed, but a lot of people do, and they talk and they exchange numbers, and so we also have night events. Like we pack a whole lot in. We start at 9 a.m. and we end like 10, 11. Leighton and I, we're like going on either end. So Leighton and I are working on like 4 hours of sleep for like
people party after that. Usually everybody goes out to dinner, goes out to a club or something afterwards. And
so it's it's full on, and people are hanging out, and so Friday night we have a growers panel, and that'll be basically I'll be on that panel. Wendy Kornberg, Craig from Alpenglow, and a couple of other people here and there. And the whole idea is just that people can ask questions to people that have been doing this for a long time and have been in the trenches doing it, and they can ask just plain practical questions. And so, and then on Saturday night, we're going to do the Dragonfly Earth Medicine Dem Pure Farmers Panel. And it's kind of similar perspective, but they just bring a different fire to the whole thing, and they're all Dem Pure certified, and there's like a whole process to it, and it's pure certified. It's a very cool thing, and I actually hope to be Dem Pure certified. I'm not at this point, but I've been a part of this twice now at the 2 conferences we did, and they were both like very magical nights. Craig led one of them, and he will lead the 2 nights that Josh and Kelly can't make. In Redway and in Portland.
The Dem Pure is definitely more of the organic religion, and the first night's more of the organic science, which we've talked about the differences.
Right, and so that's kind of how we're trying to, without saying it, like I don't know if it's that intentional, honestly, but the Dem Pure night has just been very powerful, and so. Anyways, then we're rolling to Sunday, which is I can't forget Suzanne Wainwright. I was like half a day Saturday. We're giving her like half a whole day because she has a lot to teach. Basically, the way I take it, like most people are doing pest management totally wrong, and all the way. Even if you are using beneficial insects, you're probably applying them wrong and probably using the wrong ones. And I still am doing a lot of these things wrong, and I text her, and sometimes she responds. Most of the time she's too busy. But she's going to have a half a day, and she's a beneficial insect lady. She's been in a ton of greenhouses. I kind of tout her as like the world specialist in beneficial insects, to be honest. And she spent a lot of time in the last year and a half that I've known her digging into cannabis, and she's been photographing and videoing, and she's coming out with a lot of stuff, and stuff that her peers haven't seen, because she's just getting in the trenches. And so she's a hardworking, very smart, very honest, no bullshit lady, and I get a lot of respect for her. So,
And if you have a picture of thrips on your cannabis,
oh, she's got that. She's past that.
Okay, I was going to say, the last time I talked to her, she was still looking for thrip species. But
at any conference, if you have any bugs, bring them to the conference. Not like
in a Ziploc
jar, in a mason jar. Seal that shit up, and like let us look at it. My fan just went on in here. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
No, sorry.
No, but the last time I talked to her, she was looking for thrips. She's always looking for something. So.
Yeah. So, and then Sunday is a new day for us in this conference. We brought Kevin Jodry on board from Wonderland Nursery in Garberville, California, and couldn't be more pleased. I've been a long time looking up to this guy, and he does a really cool scene over there. And he's kind of like the genetics guru. He's not a breeder per se. He does do some breeding and making his own gear, but he's really a sifter, and he'll run large populations of seeds and pull this out. And he's been in the game a long time, and he knows more about cannabis flavors and cultivars and genetics than anyone I've ever heard speak personally. Every time I hear him talk, I'm just like, what? It's like everything. I just want to record it, and listen to it over and over again. And so he's taken on the whole day, Saturday or Sunday, and he's gonna, kind of do his thing, and then we're gonna do a breeders panel, and we'll have some different breeders that will also do talks, about the different things they're breeding for, the different styles they're breeding for,
and each location you go to, you're going to have somewhat what would you call local or indigenous people there that are in the local area growers that are breeders.
Exactly.
That's the one thing that's going to be different at every show. The breeding day will be different breeders for the most part.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. You're the best. That's totally true. We're going to have breeders relative to each area, and during the lunch break, we're going to do a seed swap and clone exchange. Cool. Allegedly a clone exchange.
Hell, seed swap's worth the price of admission right there.
But so that basically, if you don't, read between the lines, dude. There's going to be seeds and shit for sale and trade.
The thing I think I want to emphasize the most is I've gone to, I'm trying to think, I don't know, maybe 4 dozen or 6 dozen different shows or conferences on cannabis. And the one that Josh and Leighton put on is by far the most educational, and the one where I learned the most about cultivation methods that I myself was focused on.
Yeah, thanks. You always say that, man. It's so, I don't want to, that's so kind of you, and thank you.
Well, when you look at the list of people in a show, I mean,
well, we just
going, wow, that's like golf.
Exactly. We're just rallying the smart people. Is all we're doing,
Yeah.
Or all I'm doing. I like to grow cannabis, and I think I'm all right at it. But
I think the way
I'm just able to be around these people, and it's fucking cool.
You probably look at this like, you see, it's like all these doctors and people that are giving their time to be at the show. Now they're, like you said, they're going to have their, costs taken care of, but that's it. They're not really nobody's making any money. And so to have people like that, like, people with doctorates and PhDs and, the top mycologists and people like that. And all of a sudden they're going to travel across the country and do 4 or 5 shows. I mean, that in itself is it's
a really big deal. Like to get like, half the crew. I mean, most of the crew, honestly, all the crew, except for myself. It's like, really? I don't know why you're giving me the time of day right now, but like, this is fucking cool,
Yeah, and that's what's awesome about the crew that you put together is everyone's there because they give a shit about furthering the education of the average grower. or the average commercial grower, and trying to stamp out someone with bad education that's out there. They're not in it to go sell product. They're not in it to go make $1 million. They're there to correct the improper education, or there to further the education, one or the other, depending on who it is. And that's what's so different about your conference in particular.
It has a lot to do with your diligence and you calling them and text them and bugging them all the time. They know you're serious and they know that you.
Well,
you know,
it's
everybody's been on the show, right? Everybody's been on the show, just
almost. It's really the folk that it's not me. It's like it's Elaine, dude. She has been at it for a long time, dude. She is passionate. She ignited my passion, like, she's like my superhero, straight up.
She's a lot of fun too.
It's like everyone's so passionate about it, and like it's beyond money, people put their lives into this, and we're trying to spread the word that you don't need fucking nutrients, chemical nutrients, and you're like destroying our earth, and like we all feel it to the core of our hearts. Like truthfully, if you want to get down to it, like it shakes us, it shakes me, and like.
Talk about cowboy.
People don't realize like how much damage. It's not just like a crop. Like you're damaging the earth when you use chemical nutrients.
Talk about cowboy for a minute. The last conference, because that was one of the things that really moved me.
Yeah, we talked about him before. He came to the microscope class that we did with Elaine right before the Redway conference last year, and. He tracked her down because they run cattle. They're cattlemen in Idaho, and I can't remember. They run like 800 acres that they own, and it's like 16,000 or some 20-some thousand that they lease, that they run cattle on. And anyways, the way people raise cattle, if you don't know, is they grow hay in the summer, and they cut it and they save it for the winter to feed the cattle over the winter, and then they bring them onto these feedlots to finish them, and they feed them corn and grain to fatten them up, type deal. And so these guys have switched over to a total pasture raised system. They don't hay. They don't grow that hay. They don't cut it. That cut all that labor, all that bullshit, all that nutrients they used to use to grow that hay, all the chemical pesticides they used to use to control, to have enough production for their hay, all the irrigation, like it goes, all the production of growing hay done. And they literally are in Idaho, in Idaho, and their cows like are digging through the snow to like find the grass, and they do, and they're running like they're a serious operation. They call it a mother operation, I think, where they basically just crank out babies, and they sell calves every year, just like a nursery would, for plants. So they're the highest quality stock, right? A nursery is the highest quality stock, and it has to put that out. Otherwise, it's a trickle down effect. You can't start with something shitty, or you can start with something shitty and try to build it up, but you'd be dumb. So, anyways, it was really powerful to have him there and to hear his story of how they had totally flipped the switch on their huge operation and the success that they're seeing. And the same way, same thing for him. He got up and he came he wasn't planning on coming to the conference, I don't think, but he came, and I asked him to kind of give up and talk his story, and the story he told was that he was a cowboy, and I didn't really expect him to say that for some reason. I don't know why, but he was like, I'm a fucking cowboy, dude. I love this shit. Like, if I was getting paid or if I wasn't, like, I fucking love every day. I love like getting on the horse. He just went into a whole story, just like we could talk about smoking pot and being in the garden and smelling the soil. Like, it's the same thing for him. And it was, anyways.
I remember him going, man, if you told me 6 months ago I'd be hanging out with a bunch of stoners in Northern California, I would have told you you're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But here he was learning about what we do and applying it to his fields. So, we're doing something right.
We should try to get him out to one of our conferences. He has some time in the winter.
I've been emailing him, and he hasn't been available on Thursday evening.
He's too busy. He can't. I caught him for half a minute. But his secretary was kind enough, anyways, when we were in Boise and we weren't able to meet up, but we talked on the phone for a few minutes, and they are just balls to the walls like we are, And he's like, in the winter, I can return an email. In the summer, in the fall, like, no way. We're like running 16-hour days. He loves it. So,
but he's definitely someone I want to get on the show and just listen to how he's applied his methods to very large scale, well beyond anything that any of us are doing.
Yeah, that'd be really cool too. Since got a little cowboy in me, I'd love to talk to him. And
figured you like that.
Yeah, man.
But I guess the point is maybe that we're bringing quite a diverse crowd, and because everyone is so passionate, it's a real thing, and people from all walks of life tend to see that, and so people have come from all over the country to come be a part of this because they recognize the speakers, and like it's probably our bad, and we're not good enough at getting the word out because we're not marketers, but so please spread the word if you're listening.
We're working on that marketing though. We gotta
yeah.
We've been see, that's the other thing. We've been wanting to work on a marketing program for about 2 or 3 months. And every time we try to get together, somebody's too busy because everybody's working their butt off.
Everybody's working their own thing, yeah.
Working out offline. What have you been up to, Roger?
I'm still trying to finish that compounded fence and all the little paddocks I want to have around here so I can have my vegetable areas segregated from the animal areas. And then I'm gonna, if I can get that done pretty soon, I'm gonna retake my greenhouse this winter and start a fish pond or fish tank or whatever I end up doing. I got so much stuff laying around. I still don't know what size I'm gonna start with, but I still think I'm gonna start probably put some fish in a 55-gallon drum, or something like that. To start with, and we'll see how that goes. But I've got, like I said, I have a 500-gallon, but I just think after talking with Ken and you and many people that have been on the show that do our friend from Kingdom Aquaponics in Texas, right? Roger, is that Roger? And
so Roger's with True Aquaponics.
Oh, True okay, True Aquaponics. Well, when I get to talk to them, they've come to that I want a bunch of small systems with smaller fish tanks so that they're all independent or segregated, or what's that word everybody likes to use?
Apartment.
Well, that's not it, but yeah, I mean, I guess we could throw a lot of words, but there's one kind of cool word we came up with. But I think about doing that, and like Josh was saying, I think I'm gonna start in the greenhouse. I think I'm going to devote I haven't figured it out. I'm kind of like one of these people, once I get in there and the floor is clean again and I can build a new system this year, I'm not going to totally redesign my entire system. I'm just going to adapt everything. I'm going to change the plumbing around so I can do my hydroponics and then alongside of aquaponics, because I think this year it'd be more important for me to concentrate on keeping the fish alive, and cycling in my system. And fortunately, I have some help from a couple people that are going to send me, water. And I think Marty's promised me some. And I want to say Josh had promised me some, I think, water. Like he said, he's got water that's 12 years old, or stuff that's, been around 12 years, which is interesting. I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that, because I went under the impression that water would sustain for that long. So I'm not sure. We have to have a talk about that later. I won't waste everybody's time, but that's about it. Just trying to hang in there and get the farm back up and running. I finally got another vehicle so that I can hire somebody to come out here and work and drive my vehicle around to get supplies and stuff like that. So we've done that. And of course, the battery went dead as a doornail. When I went out to start it and move it around yesterday and do some work, the damn truck wouldn't start because the battery was dead. So something else I can spend money on. The lawnmower's broke, the battery's dead, and my greenhouse is overgrown with blackberries. So One good thing is I can cut the blackberries up with the idea of a big harvest of a medicine or ferment material, so I can do my first ferment, so it'll be out of blackberries and the entire plant, the vines, the thorns, the whole deal. So you get that spectrum nutrient.
Save some leaves too for medicinal purposes.
Save some leaves for medicinal purposes.
Dry some leaves down.
Yeah, like put them in a mason jar and let them dry.
Stomach or intestinal problems.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll get into that some other time. Once I have a harvest, I'll bring on some blackberry leaves to show everybody, and we can talk about the medicinal effects of it and stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I'm going to do. I'll get into. I still haven't done the lactobacillus or anything because I'm waiting to get things going. I wanted to implement it, but I just had been having so much on my plate that, like I always get a kick out of it. I know he hates when I say it, when I tell Mr. Green Jeans I don't have time to breed. You know, I mean, I really have some, you know, it would be fun, but, you know, there's only so much space. And, you know, again, maybe that's a lame excuse and I probably could, but I just don't feel like I want another project on my plate. You know, my plate's full right now. I need to eat a couple helpings. And once I run out of, turkey, and once I run out of baked beans, then I can start eating the rest of the macaroni and cheese, or whatever. Poor analogies, I guess. But, so I digress. Other than that, running the forum, things are going real good over at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com. We're getting ready to set in for our holiday season, which is always fun. Because we'll probably. Last year I had a Christmas essay test for people, and you listeners out there, if you want to come over and join us, I usually around Christmas I will run some kind of contest, like have the 12 days of Christmas. So last year I ran a contest where we had 12 entrants to do an essay on how medical cannabis benefits you in your life, because we have a lot of older medical patients on our forum. In fact, I think that's the majority of what we have. But they don't really know much about that stuff. So, it was to learn like what kind of afflictions that people are using. I wanted to, to learn what people were using the medical marijuana for. The older folks, what was it because of cancer? Was it get off of opioids? Was it because of back pain? Or anxiety? And so I asked them to do stories. So we'll probably do something like that in December again. And then last year, well, we just gave everybody a prize. I think we had a first prize and maybe a second prize, and then we gave everybody from second or third on down another prize, and usually, that could be genetics. We now have, we've been around long enough, and our marketing team has put together a really nice collection of T-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies and stuff. And what's cool about the T-shirts, we got a lot of those like cartoon type. So like we got a T-shirt for Bubba Kush, and we got a T-shirt for New York City Diesel. And so you can just imagine it's got the little caricature or some kind of little cartoon or whatever it is on it. So like I think New York City Diesel has a train on it, or diesel train, and it's pretty. Anyway, you can stop by the shop, and I'm sure Robert will be thrilled to have y'all peruse through his shop and look at the T-shirt apparel over there. Very good quality, shirts and all like that. And like I said, it's more for fun. You can actually buy. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that, can I? Can't say that. Anyway, let's just say that if you procured certain genetics, there's T-shirts that'll match the genetics that you procured. I about stepped in that one, didn't I?
Just about.
Yeah.
Anything else you got going on there?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm good. No, I'm still sitting here working out of my studio, and I'm still working on getting some personal things straightened out, and it's getting better and better, but still got dark days. And it's been dark here for 3 or 4 days, You know, we were talking earlier. I wanted to reach out to the. Well, I think Steve already did it once when I was over there making some tea. We want to make a big shout out to everybody suffering and hope nobody loses any family, and you know, hope you get out of your home and evacuated in time out in California where we got our latest fire out there. And we were talking earlier about telling them the 3 or 4 days I've been shut in under dark skies. I mean, middle of the day and it's dark outside almost, you know. It's been that cloudy. It doesn't rain. And what I hate, well, I'm kind of glad it doesn't rain because I live in the swamp, and the more it rains, the more I live in the swamp. You know, more swampy it gets. So I've been kind of happy that I'm on the edge. We're somehow in this area where we could either be right in it or on the edge of it for days. You know, where it looks like it's going to pour rain any minute, but it never really pours in our area. It's like beside us, all around us or whatever. So I'm looking for a sunny day. I think we're going to get some sun tomorrow. So that should cheer me up, and, you know, we'll get to work because I'm dying to get this fence done, because that's going to enable me to put up another 24 by 30 greenhouse frame that I've got, and which is going to be used basically as a shop and storage facility right now. But by doing that, it will allow me to take everything out of the greenhouse, you know, and clean up the whole farm a little bit, you know, and get the original my commercial greenhouse going again this year, because I'm down to do it. And I'm looking forward to getting out of the, you know, it's done me very well, but I'm looking forward to getting out of the salts, you know. So I too am looking for different alternatives, and, you know, plan on using aquaponics as more than just feeding lettuce. You know, I plan on using trying to, you know, put together ties with pet companies for, you know, to sell koi to or whatever. And you know, and then I'd like to have some sections. That's why I like the idea of several different systems, because some systems will be fish that I might eat later, or, you know, whatever. Might just have a, you know, a bigger, I don't know. Again, like I said, when I'm standing there inside the greenhouse, once everything's out of it again and there's nothing but floor, that's when I'm going to figure out how big my aquaponic system's going to be, you know, because, well, we'll start rolling tanks in there and getting the plumbing out and just having fun. That's my favorite time, is when I get to go. It's somewhat tedious, but it's not backbreaking really. But every year when I used to love it every year when I'd go out, because I still have a conventional time frame, because I've never been able to afford to heat my greenhouse. So I lose my crops at the end of January. I mean, at the end of December, beginning of January every year when I've grown, and then I grow all through the conventional season and well into the fall, into the winter, which is longer than the conventional guys actually do. But my favorite time is once I get the greenhouse cleaned out every year, and I pull all the plumbing apart and get the algae that's accrued and stuff like that, and clean out all the lines, and I got all the lines and everything laying there back and forth. Well, I need to stop talking because there's a freaking comedy show going on in chat here, you know. And I can't read it while I'm talking. So no, I'm just messing with y'all.
I'm just reading some of the private chat going on.
I'm rambling on. So anyway, thanks for giving me some time to ramble on. You know, I feeling kind of weird tonight. I had some kind of attack a little bit earlier, so you know, I'm feeling better though. So I hope. Yeah, I was going to check out, but I figured I'd be better off sitting here. If something happened, more serious happened, that at least I'd be here amongst people. I could say, call somebody for me, you know. Yeah.
All right. Well, I've been just cracking some seeds. I'll have some footage of that up. I got video going up on the YouTube channel soon on seed sprout tea, and some other cool stuff going up soon. And yeah, we have some cool guests lined up going for the rest of the month. And see you guys again soon. Does anybody else have anything else you want to drop?
Great show tonight, Steve. Another great guest. Very interesting. You know, contrary to some beliefs people talk about on this show, but very informed and definitely educated in his craft. I enjoyed Nelson a whole lot, you know.
Okay.
I like it too, because he said 2 or 3 things he loves to do. It's the same way I feel about things. I always love it when one of these experts come on here and say something that kind of tells me I might be on the right track. So it's always fun.
How do people find you there, Roger?
You can find me at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com, and we've got a great team of people over there. Just come by and sign up, and hey, we'll just come over and sign up. We also have a Bud of the Month contest you might want to check out, and you can read all about that if you come over to the. In fact, we got a Facebook page too. I don't have anything to do with the Facebook page, but I do run the Bud of the Month with our staff there, and they promote it there. So if you want to read about the Bud of the Month, you can go to ilovegrowingmarijuana.com Facebook page, or you can come join the forum and talk to any of our forum staff, and they'll be glad to help you out.
Awesome.
How do we find you, Mr. Green Jeans?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me at greenjeansgarden.com. Yeah, that's the real green jeans.
Green jeans.
What about you, Josh?
Coyotes.
What happened to Dutch there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I was asking if you could hear the coyotes. Were they too quiet? I'm in coyote territory right now.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
at dutchblooms.net and regenerativeorganiccannabis.com.
All right. And you can check me out at Ponics.com. From there, you can check out the link if you want to check out the classes with Marty and I, or you can check out the link in the description. All right, everybody. Take care. Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Y'all have a good one.